I'm Kyle.
And I'm Trevor, and welcome to Catching Up on Cinema. If you aren't familiar with the program, Catching Up on Cinema is a film analysis podcast wherein we introduce each other to films, expand our cinematic horizons, and, in essence, catch up on our cinema. So it is the month of March 2021, and we are in the midst of our special event month, March of the Monsters. Basically, we're celebrating the impending arrival of Godzilla vs. Kong from 2021 by taking a look at the earlier filmography of both the titular monsters. So that would be, of course, Godzilla and King Kong. So we kick things off this month with a review of the original King Kong from 1933, and it seemed appropriate to continue that trend basically by advancing in the timeline. Basically, we're perhaps going to be tackling these in chronological order, but it seemed fitting to follow up the original King Kong with the original Godzilla, or Gojira, if you want to call it by its Japanese title, from 1954, directed by Ishiro Honda. More than likely, just so you know, we're probably going to be calling him Godzilla, because Japanese pronunciation isn't that difficult, but jumping back and forth between English, Japanese, and English tongues in the same sentence, that's a motherfucker, even for me. So henceforth, more than likely, we'll be referring to him as Godzilla. So much like we did with King Kong last week, I figured it would be appropriate to start off by just sharing a little something about our personal backgrounds with the title character. So in this case, Kyle, why don't you let the folks at home know what your background is with the Big G, Godzilla himself?
That's a great question, Trevor. Thank you for asking that question. So my experience with Godzilla, much like most white kids born after 1990, or born and raised in the 90s, basically, was Godzilla 1998, starring Matthew Broderick and that lady from She-Devil, and Hank Azaria. I think that's the number 3.
And Harry Shearer as well, don't forget him.
Yes, 3 cast members from The Simpsons, basically.
Yes, that's the most important thing about the cast. And of course, Jean Reno,
yes,
kind of in his prime, in the eyes of most Americans anyway.
I love Jean Reno in that movie. I know it's not good as a Godzilla property. I still enjoy watching that movie. I think it leading up to... Once Godzilla's on screen, it goes to absolute shit. But I think the build-up in that movie is pretty good. So that was my first experience with Godzilla. And movie soundtracks, by the way. It was a very, very popular movie soundtrack. Remember that P. Diddy's Puff Daddy song? Because it was Puff Daddy at the time.
Yeah, no, I thought you were referencing the score.
Oh, no.
Okay. Okay. But no, I do remember that CD selling very, very well, and I do remember the music video, the Puff Daddy music video.
I did see Godzilla 2000, and because Godzilla 98 was my first experience with Godzilla, I thought Godzilla 2000 was fucking stupid. I'm like, this looks nothing like Godzilla, guys. Like, what is going on here? And then I haven't really touched it until Godzilla 2014, which I really enjoyed. And then it's not Godzilla technically, but I definitely watched Gamera and the 1954 Godzilla around the same time. And then, of course, what's the most recent one? Of the King of the Monsters, which was also a lot of fun. So pretty much just American stuff with a couple of little Japanese tidbits. Oh, I did see Mechagodzilla as well. I believe you let me borrow that, or at least recommended it.
Which one was it? Was it the original flavor or extra crispy? Or
it seemed like the 80s. It might have been the 70s.
You sound like Rocky Balboa now. Yeah, yeah. It was probably from the 70s.
Okay,
and,
then yeah.
Was there more than well, shit, both
Terror.
of them had more than one monster. Oh, Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Yeah,
okay.
Terror of Mechagodzilla.
So that was actually his second appearance. And more than likely, yeah, you did watch that because I lent it to you, or I kind of twisted your arm to watch it because that was one of my favorites and continues to be one of my favorites. But that's really funny, Kyle, because what you're saying in as many words is your exposure to Godzilla has been like 10% 90s childhood and like 90% talking about movies with me.
yeah, pretty much.
Because like probably 3/4 of the movies you listed are ones that we've reviewed for this show.
Yeah.
or I, told you, oh, you should definitely watch that one.
Yeah, I had no reason to visit Godzilla properties until you came along, so.
Well, you're welcome. I hope.
I guess, yeah. No,
Yeah.
no I like this I like this Godzilla movie.
No, well, I mean, it's the first one. It's in the Criterion Collection. Did something right, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm really looking forward to Shin Godzilla. I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, I'm actually not only looking forward to rewatching that. I've seen it 3 times at this point. But more importantly, I'm looking forward to talking about it with you. Because I think if you actually dump some time into you'll get a lot out of it. It's a very dense movie.
Yeah.
It's a very, very fascinating film. There's a reason it won the equivalent of the Japanese Best Picture the year it came out.
They don't just give those to anybody.
It's literally one a year. And, having it be a big special effects bonanza film, you don't see that in American. You don't see that in the American film industry generally, unless it's Peter Jackson's Return of the King or something, or Titanic. But that's Titanic.
Yeah.
It's all the trophies for James Cameron.
Pretty much, yeah.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about that one with you, especially after watching this one, rewatching this one, because there are some similarities there that I guess I wasn't as aware how similar they were in some regards. So it was kind of nice to have a refresher. But for me, my background with Godzilla, I'm not going to go into a shit ton of detail here because I could just talk about this instead of even getting into the movie itself. But I've been enamored with Godzilla literally my entire life. Probably before I could speak, probably before I could walk. Somehow I was aware that there was a thing called Godzilla, and I loved it. My bath toys when I was a baby were little Godzilla figurines. We had a big one and we had a little one that it had the pincher hands, so you could attach him to things and stuff.
Yeah.
And when I was very little, Son of Godzilla was my favorite. And actually, I very recently picked up the Criterion Showa era box set. And
Good for you.
Yeah, it deserves to be in my home. It needs to be in my home, frankly. And it's a handsome package. It's an oblong package for fucking sure. It hates your shelf. If you're a collector and you want to find a home for this fucker, good luck with that. But it's a very handsome package, and I'm very excited to revisit some of those older Godzilla films from my childhood, especially Son of Godzilla, because that was one of those. That's one of those very rare early Godzilla movies that has not been re-released that many times. And in fact, if you try to get it on DVD right now, it's a $80 disc.
Ooh.
It's fucking nuts. And it's not even that good of a movie. It's just the one that was my favorite when I was a kid because I had a fucking baby. But aside from that, we also had I think it was recorded off of TBS or something. No commercials though, so maybe it was an HBO weekend or something. But my parents had a VHS tape called Godzilla's Best. It was written. It was written with a label maker on the spine of the VHS tape. It just said Godzilla's Best. So Dad actually went to the trouble to label something. That never happens, Kyle. Not in our household. Organization, not the name of the day. But that tape had Godzilla versus Mothra. But ahead of that, it also had Terror of Mechagodzilla. Back to back. So it was a twofer. It was a doubleheader, and that was maybe the most played tape in the house, except for Transformers the movie, which both my brother and I wore the fuck out of. But yeah, I've been following the franchise since birth, essentially, since the late '80s, and I'll never forget when Godzilla vs. Biollante came out, because I don't know when it arrived in the States, but it came out in Japan in 1989, and it held the distinction for a very long time for being the last Godzilla movie to make its way over to American shores, because in the 90s Godzilla was just absent in this country anyway. The franchise continued in Japan, but there was that era where we weren't getting any of it. Japan wasn't exporting any of those products to us for a long stretch of time, and that one was you're walking up and down the video store aisle and it's a Godzilla movie I don't know? What? What is this? And, it became like the new favorite tape in the house for quite a while. In fact, I didn't own it. A friend of mine did. And I remember going over to his house, and he was like king shit for a day where it's like, I got the new Godzilla movie. And I was like, what the fuck? And I think we watched it twice in like the same day or something.
I've actually done that before. A buddy of mine, we watched Drinking Buddies, the movie Drinking Buddies. It's fine. It's okay. But we were drinking while watching it, and we were sitting there drinking together, watching it. And we're just like, do you want to watch it again? We're like, yeah, I kind of do. We ended up watching it twice. I don't know why. It just both struck us at the same time. It's almost like a little rom-com. It's like an indie little rom-com kind of thing.
Huh. That's a curious thing. I can't think of another movie I've done that with other than maybe that Godzilla movie.
I think it's because there's like legit drinking. It's kind of nice to have people drinking in the movie, and they're drinking throughout the movie, so it made it kind of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it, especially with the right company and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll say about early childhood Godzilla memories is that there was a card store, like literally like a baseball card store. It was like in the same complex as like a Costco we have up north here. I walked in there, like my parents were doing some shopping at Costco, and I went in there with my grandma who was visiting from Hawaii, and we were just like futzing around there waiting for my parents to get done shopping and stuff, and I came across a bootleg VHS of Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, which was from 1995 and was the film that closed the Heisei era of the Godzilla movies. And again, remember the last movie that came out officially in the United States came out in 1989, and this one came out in 1995, and I wasn't aware of it. So I saw this bootleg on the shelf, and I didn't know what a bootleg was because I was a child. I was like it was probably literally 1995 or 1996 when I saw this thing. And I convinced my grandmother to buy it for me, and oh my god, the picture quality was horrendous. like everything had a gray tinge to it. You could fiddle with the tracking all day long. It would just never figure itself out. It was subtitled, actually fairly well. But that was my introduction to the world of importing movies, and if you've listened to an episode of this fucking show, you know that that's a thing that I've been doing, and that was the genesis of it, was stumbling across this bootleg Godzilla movie, this overpriced bootleg Godzilla movie, and then for like the next 3 or 4 years after that, those bootlegs would serve as like birthday and Christmas gifts, because I'd tell my parents like, I don't really want anything. I just want that. I want these piece of shit VHS tapes as we're like inching our way towards the DVD medium. But yeah, obviously Godzilla is very important to me. And actually, it's been kind of funny because Kyle pointed out to me that's like, you want to do Godzilla 54?
Yeah.
Really? And the way I was describing it before we started recording was the reason why I've been pussyfooting around talking about this like very important film is that it's like, feel like you're not worthy in some regard. Like it's like, oh man, it's a big deal, I don't want to fuck it up. It's like meeting a celebrity and getting really nervous about it. And I just felt now was the time, because if we did King Kong, we got to do Godzilla.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But yeah, Kyle, you wanna get into the movie proper here?
Yeah. Do you want to give a rundown of the movie?
I mean, it's tradition, Kyle. You want to give us a plot summary for Godzilla 1954?
Yeah, some lizard from the Jurassic era finds its way into a lovely village in Japan, wreaks a little bit of havoc, and then I think does he make his way to Tokyo, or is it just another part of Japan?
No, this time it is Tokyo.
Okay.
Like that's the trope, but in this time it really is Tokyo.
And he gets to Tokyo, and then a cycloptic scientist has to figure out a way to kill him, basically.
That was sloppy, meandering. Everyone in the room is now dumber, Kyle. I award you no points. May God have mercy on your soul.
Full disclosure from listeners, I'm having a hell of a week, so if my brain power's not all there, I apologize. But do you want to give a better summary?
No, I don't. But
I meant no disrespect with that.
No, I thought it was charming, but I'll just contribute to that by just giving a little bit of a rundown of the talent involved in putting this thing to the silver screen, because in some ways this is like not just a groundbreaking film, but also like this was an epoch. Like this was a moment where a lot of major players in the Japanese film industry would all come together and give us something really special. And not only that, like give us like the equivalent of like an Avengers team for filmmakers, where it's like, okay, you got all those guys together working on a project, we're gonna go see it because it's gonna be good. And what I'm talking about here is the director, Ishiro Honda, who, as far as I understand, was primarily a documentary filmmaker prior to this. He lived a really fascinating life. I mean, just reading up on the guy was really interesting. The man did like 6 tours in the Japanese military, which you need to remember this movie came out in 1954, but the man had a life before that, and Japan did some stuff before that, immediately before that, and had some things done to them immediately before that. But yeah, he was drafted into the Japanese military multiple times. So like every time he kind of tried to get his life together, seemed like he was being shipped off to some foreign country. And in fact, he was a POW at one point. And somehow he managed to become a filmmaker after all that horse shit. But yeah, primarily he was a documentarian, which is kind of interesting because it actually kind of shows in the way a lot of the acting scenes are handled in this film. There's a little bit of like a fly on the wall feel to a lot of the dialogue scenes. And not only that, the cast of thousands feel to it. Like, we do have principal players and we do have melodrama in the form of like the relationships that form and are broken over the course of the drama in the film. But just the sheer number of speaking roles in this film makes it feel like the story of like a whole country as opposed to just, a love triangle, which it easily could have boiled down to. But beside him, we also have the producer, Tomoyuki Tanaka, who basically was the shepherd for this Godzilla franchise up until his death, like in the late 90s. So he was like the equivalent of like Albert Broccoli for the James Bond films. Like the guy who was producing each and every one of these franchise films. Huge producer in Japanese film, and the studio's Toho, by the way, which to this day I think is the largest in Japan. And then on top of that, though, we had Willis O'Brien last time for King Kong when it came to our special effects, or visual effects rather, for the stop motion of King Kong. But for this one, we had Eiji Tsuburaya, who is a titan of the industry for this time period of Japanese film. He directed a lot of propaganda films for the Japanese military.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But in doing that, and also he was a aviation enthusiast, which shows in some of the work he does in a lot of these Godzilla films. You can tell he loves model airplanes and suspending them from fishing line and strapping fireworks to them. But he would go on to do the special effects for most of the early Godzilla films. I think he died in the 70s. But before that, he founded his own company, Tsuburaya Productions, which would give birth to one of the other most enduring Japanese, not film properties, but just fictional, like sci-fi universes. That would be the Ultraman franchise. So he didn't live to see what that would become, but that series began in the 60s and continues to this day. A new Ultraman every fucking year, whether you want it or not. And the last person I'll highlight here, and I'm not even going to get into the cast until we get into it, but the last person to highlight here is Akira Ifukube, who's the composer. And holy fucking shit, this guy made a gigantic contribution to the film world by giving us some of the most iconic music in film history. If you ask me, the Godzilla March is one of the most iconic themes in all of film.
Maybe not for American audiences, but it demands your attention. Like you can't escape it. I actually listened to like a contemporary, like an orchestra. I mean, plenty of orchestras have probably covered it, but there's a really good version on Spotify that you can find.
Oh yeah, no. His compositions for the entire Godzilla film franchise and films outside of the Godzilla franchise. It's all incredible stuff, and apparently he was self-taught, which is nuts.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and funny enough, trivia factoid: he actually did suffer some radiation sickness at one point in his life. Nothing to do with bombs. He was working. He was also drafted by the Japanese military, and something to do with like working in the radiology department. Resources were strapped, and apparently they didn't have any lead shielding to provide their employees. Good job.
Way to go.
Yeah. But yeah, all of his compositions for all of the Godzilla movies are tremendous stuff. Like, and some of my favorite memories of childhood are like humming along to these movies and shit. But that being said, yeah, we should get into the film itself. That was very top heavy. Sorry about that. So
get the lead out now so we can get into the movie proper.
I told you this was going to happen, Kyle. You're not doing your job.
Well, hey man, this was your movie choice, so I'm not gonna be like, hey, like I'm not gonna
zip it.
Can't do that, but because I don't know when we can cut corners, so I'll try to be mindful.
Okay, well, the film actually begins. Also, one other thing to note: we did this with King Kong 33. There are some alternate versions of King Kong 33, not terribly altered, but there was a censored version of that film. So we did actually point out some shots here and there that were excised from the censored cut of that film. In Godzilla's case, there's of course the American cut of the film, Godzilla King of the Monsters from 1956, starring Raymond Burr, with the dulcet tones of Raymond Burr. That man has a tremendous speaking voice. Perry Mason himself. I'm not gonna focus too hard on comparing the two. There's really not much point to it, other than the fact that the American cut is slightly streamlined. Like it moves at a brisker pace, so I could see that being a plus in some regards, because this film doesn't drag per se, but it definitely could use a little bit of trimming here and there. And the American cut actually does provide that, but the change in the perspective is the greatest deviation from how the story is presented in the original Japanese cut, because we have Raymond Burr just on the sidelines of every important event that happens in the story. It's like you're just conveniently everywhere that things happen, huh? Whereas the Japanese one, like I said, is more. It's a bigger story that doesn't really care too much about having main characters or drama and stuff like that.
I sent my dad a polo, or my dad sent me a polo, like just a little message, like, "Hey, what you up to?" I'm like, "Oh, nothing, just watching The Wailing. It's a Korean horror film," and he's like, "Are you watching it with subtitles or dubs?" I'm like, "Who the fuck watches it with dubs? Like, what's wrong with you? Why would I watch it with dubs? Subtitles."
Well, I mean, subtitled movies were, they were a thing, like, back in the day, but they were less commonplace when it came to, lower budget films, like the Godzilla King of the Monsters. Actually, the presentation of that version of the film is kind of interesting, because that was the cut of the film I knew for most of my life, because as far as I know, the Japanese cut wasn't available outside of Japan, readily available anyway, until like the 2000s. Like that's the first time I knew of an official DVD release for it, and I certainly got it. It wasn't a Criterion disc, but the 56 version was the one I knew, and what's curious about it is that it's not subtitled. But there is still a fair amount of Japanese language track present in the film, because Raymond Burr and a handful of other actors who were brought in to film additional scenes parallel to the main footage of the Japanese cut of the film, they're all speaking English, but then they cut away to people who are supposedly in the room with him speaking Japanese, and most of them are just speaking Japanese without subtitles, and The only translation we get comes in the form of the actors beside Raymond Burr telling him, "He said that. He said you're fat." But yeah, most of the actors in the Japanese footage are just allowed to speak Japanese. It makes for an interesting experience because as a child, actually, that's probably the first time I ever heard the Japanese language, honestly. Watching the original American cut of Godzilla. And it wasn't subtitled, so I really had no idea what they were talking about, and it was kind of fascinating. But a major difference between the way the films begin is the American cut has it throws us right into the action. So like Raymond Burr is like covered in rubble, and the movie is like it's like the original cut of Blade Runner, where Harrison Ford's really bored and tired, and he ate a lot of cheese before he got in the recording booth to do this studio-mandated voiceover. The American cut of Godzilla is riddled with Raymond Burr voiceover to get us up to speed with every fucking thing that happens because American B-movie distributors in the 50s had no confidence in Americans' ability to comprehend what's going on without it being spoon-fed to them. But yeah, it begins with him after Tokyo's already been leveled, and then him being carted off to a hospital and saying, "And here's how it happened." And then we roll back and we diddle-loot back to a few days earlier.
I feel like that was Mechagodzilla. Was there's voiceover in the beginning.
No. That one begins with it begins with a Rocky sequel montage.
Yeah.
So the Rocky sequels always begin with the last few minutes of the previous Rocky.
Yeah.
They do that with the opening credits and showing the first fight with Mechagodzilla, but they cut out King Caesar because he's goofy looking. and this movie's more serious. And then we have a girl she's on the rocks, and then a submarine, and then Titanosaurus kills the submarine. Yeah, that's the beginning of Terror Mechagodzilla.
Can I drop us into the movie? Because I actually wanted to talk about how this opened.
The opening credits?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I had some questions. So this movie, I again, like with these old movies, I'm trying to put myself in the like me in the theater as a kid watching this movie. This movie starts off like it's like the equivalent of Mortal Kombat. We get Godzilla growls and roars immediately, and we've got what is supposed to it's kind of supposed to be the foot stomps, but it's a drum, and we got like this pounding like foot stomp going on, and then we get now is this just like physical credits where it's just like an actual sheet of paper gliding up?
Yeah, you can see the text wiggling just a little bit.
Okay,
and I think you're spot on, Kyle. I think it's on a roller, and they're just like pulling it up in front of the camera. It's kind of beautiful because it's Japanese kanji. It's all script, so it's all calligraphy to write all the cast and credits and stuff. But yeah, this is a major difference from the American cut and the Japanese cut. Is like you said, we get Godzilla's roar in the Japanese version. We get his soon-to-be iconic march immediately during the opening credits. It's basically telling. It's the it's the equivalent of that. It's Kyle's iconic door knock.
It's not. I'm not the only one that does that. I have a buddy of mine. We do the same knock. Yeah.
I told my girlfriend about that, and she does it now too.
I'll do it just. I'll just do it just randomly.
So it'll be Saturday night, and I'm ready for date night, and I'll hear that. Kyle?
I was doing it at the library today. The other guys were talking. I'm like, trying to think about what I was going to type, but I kept stopping and doing that. I realized I was doing it. I'm like, I should probably stop doing that.
Yeah, it's like a virus. It won't go away. It just gets stuck in there. But yeah, this movie begins with the theme music that, this is the first time anyone's hearing it, so it's not iconic yet. But this is kind of securing this piece of music's place as like, this is the theme music.
Yeah. Whenever
you hear this, get hype.
Yeah.
But yeah, the stomping sound effect, really, really cool trivia factoid here. So in terms of credits, our composer, Akira Ifukube, he should get additional credit. I hope he did, for doing some sound design not just like composition of the score. He was also the guy who gave us the Godzilla roar and the Godzilla stomps. Like he pioneered those sound effects. He did the Foley work himself, a composer.
I think.
Yeah. Do you know how they made the fucking roar?
No, I was gonna say it is the thing. I think that Godzilla has the most iconic roar because you know it's Godzilla. Like King Kong was like it was like a reverse lion roar. It was like two different roars backwards. It's like
it's just a tiger.
Yeah,
like tigers generally are like the go-to for any snarling beast kind of noise.
Yeah,
it's either that or doom noises, which anytime I hear add doom sound effect, oh my god, that or a GoldenEye sound effect. If I hear a sound from either of those games, it just puts the biggest smile on my face because it tells me that whoever was doing the sound design for that product gave no fucks. Because it's not like a Wilhelm scream where it's like a badge of honor, where it's like, yeah, I did the entire soundscape for this film, and then I decided to slip one in there just, to let them know the job's done. Doom sound effects, it's like if something falls down and goes, whoa, it's like, okay, I know that you ran out of buttons to push on your synthesizer, but the Godzilla roar is incredibly distinct. And the reason for that is that unlike traditional sound design for creatures and whatnot, it involves no animal sounds as a source. They took like a resin-coated like glove and stroked it across a contrabass's strings, so like a bass, and somehow they tuned the sound produced by that. Who the fuck would think to do that? And that's how we got our Godzilla roar.
I honestly think the plot of this movie can kind of take a back seat. I think you should just tell the listeners and tell me more like Godzilla trivia, but I also want to like discuss once we get to when Godzilla actually comes up. I want to talk about how how the Japanese film studio went in the direction of creating a monster as opposed to what they did in the American film industry with like King Kong. But that's
Yeah, no, you definitely need to bring that up. But I keep trying to get away from the trivia stuff, but it just keeps coming because the first fucking thing that we see in this movie is a trivia factoid.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm like the plot. I mean, you can pretty much distill the plot. It's not there are important things along the way, but I think we could probably that's where we can cut the corners. Is you can get more about the trivia, more about the background of it, because I think with a movie this old, that's going to be more.
Okay, well, we've gotten past the opening credits, so we're making progress. But the very first thing that we see in the film seems innocuous until you know a little bit of history. So prepare yourself. So our film opens after the credits with like a fishing boat at sea. And it's just a bunch of people playing music. Looks plenty peaceful. And then, holy shit, the ocean is boiling, and there's a flash of light, and we get some footage of our, like, I think it's a telegraph they're operating. It's not even a radio. They're just, like, sending a telegraph,
It's a Morse code. They're sending off, like...
Yeah, so it's not even a radio communique, but they're doing, like, Morse code or a telegraph or something, radioing for distress, essentially, to the mainland.
They get it off just barely.
Just barely, because we get our first miniature effects in the film in the form of this fishing boat catching fire and sinking. Like, Tsuburaya likes planes, he likes fireworks, and he loves fire. Like, have you ever seen a picture of what this guy looks like, Kyle? Oh, he has an utterly charming look to him. He always has a big old hat and pitch black sunglasses, and he's like real tiny too, so it's like, oh yeah, that man likes to blow shit up. I can tell. I can tell the pyros and
I know the pyros when I see them, man.
Yeah, he has a little bit of like a Stan Lee vibe to him. Not as verbose, like as far as I know, he didn't do a whole lot of PR and stuff, but he always had that kind of like charming grandpa appeal to him. And he loved to blow shit up. But the trivia that I've been alluding to here comes in the form of like a true to life story that I don't know if it's ever been adapted to film, but it's now that we've had Chernobyl, this could be something. Oh yeah, also in Japan they actually made a film about the Fukushima incident. It was the earthquake that caused the problems with the nuclear reactor.
Yeah, I remember that.
Big fucking deal. They actually made a film version of that story that I would very much like to see. Ken Watanabe's in there.
Oh, nice. I like it.
Yeah, I've heard it's very good. Probably not Chernobyl good, but good enough. It's too recent. I'm sure the Japanese government would prefer not to get into the nitty gritty of some of the shit that went down. But the real life incident that happened here was a boat called the Daigo Fukuru Maru, or Lucky Dragon number 5. Basically, it was a Japanese fishing boat that happened to be near the Bikini Atoll when we dropped a bomb on it, like a nuclear bomb. And it was a gigantic nuclear bomb, maybe the biggest that the Americans have ever tested. And those sailors all died a horrible death due to radiation sickness and whatnot. I don't even think they really made it to shore. But that incident was what gave way to the inspiration for developing this film.
Gotcha.
That, nuclear bombs are bad. And the other really big important thing was that during the Japanese occupation, so post-World War II, the Japanese news outlets and the government were kind of stifled. We were disallowing them from speaking in public about nuclear bombs.
Gotcha.
So in the fallout of that, I don't think it was until the early 50s that those bars were lifted, and it's like, okay, you guys can. It's been long enough, you guys can do your own shit. But there were restrictions for many years. So those restrictions being lifted were also a catalyst for this film coming out when it did. But yeah, this fishing boat goes down, and this is where we get our initial command center for the story unfolding, and it's basically just the office, like the dispatch essentially for all these boats.
It's too well lit, honestly. I needed it to be darker.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised how little smoking there is in this movie.
There's no fucking smoking.
I know, it's nuts.
I can't wait to jump into some Japanese noir, because there's going to be so much smoking in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I know of Japanese culture suggests that, yeah, smoking's kind of a thing.
It's a big deal.
Especially back in the day.
Yeah.
So it's kind of shocking. Maybe there was some form of censorship or something. But it needs to be said, 1954 was a hell of a year for the Japanese film industry. I mean, holy fucking shit. We had Seven Samurai. We had Sancho the Bailiff. We had the first of the Samurai trilogy, which probably is the first Japanese subtitled film I ever saw in my life. I had a sick day from school in 4th grade, I think. And my mom happened to be sick that day too, and she borrowed it from the library.
Oh, nice.
So I got introduced to Toshiro Mifune and Japanese cinema, well, proper Japanese cinema, not, Godzilla movies, all in one fell swoop. It was a very good day. But yeah, it was 1954 was a hell of a year for Japanese cinema. But after this boat goes down, they send a second boat to investigate the area. So it needs to be said that the sheer number of extras at work in a lot of these scenes is kind of cool. It lends it a sense of reality, just like the hustle and bustle in this office. Like everybody seems like they have a purpose and they're really jazzed about getting shit done.
Yeah.
And all the while you have all these women and elder men, old men and women trying to push their way into the office, just screaming about my husband was on that boat, what's going on? And it's we don't know. Everybody's very confused. And did you not just see the shit come in on Morse code? This takes a little while to fucking figure out. It's for the love of God, give me a break. But they send a second boat, and it goes down too. And that's the only other one that I think we see actually go down.
Yeah, it's all. Yeah, because they're we're going to send another 2 more. And then later they're yeah, one of them's down. All right, the other one's down too. Okay. Yeah, they just keep going down.
Yeah, it becomes a problem. And thankfully, the filmmaker was kind enough to not show all of that. It's okay, two is good enough. We can just imply the rest of the loss of life and damage through just dialogue.
As we get our newspaper slides of naval mines, undersea volcano, what could it possibly be?
Yeah, this actually, this is something I kind of forgot about this movie that I talked about when I was talking about Gamera and how those films bear a very strong resemblance to Godzilla 2014. Check it out, folks at home, if you haven't heard that episode. It's an early one. We did a dual review of both American Godzilla movies at the time. So that would be Godzilla 98 and Godzilla 2014. The stylistic similarities in the presentation of the story. What always struck me about the Gamera films is how extensive the use is of radio and television broadcasts and like newspaper headlines to fill in the gaps of the story that the major players in the film really have no business knowing or expositing to us. It lends things a huge sense of reality that otherwise wouldn't be there. And this film kind of does it too, in the form of these headlines that Kyle pointed out, that occasionally major developments happen and just the state of like the public mindset is expressed to us through like news broadcasts or radio and things like that. But there's a minor development here in the form of a few survivors from the shipwrecks washing up on an island called Odo Island. And we also start to get introduced slowly to characters that, because in 1954, as a Japanese audience member, you would know who the stars are. So it's like, oh, those people are way more hot than everyone else in this movie. Clearly, there are stars. Like you don't have to know who they are. You can just tell from aesthetics.
Yeah, that was really helpful in this. I'm like, yeah, the two hotties. I'm like both of them. Like, ooh, wow, she's really pretty. I'm like, damn, he's handsome. I'm like, these are our main characters.
Oh yeah. No, our principal players in this movie are absurdly handsome, in stark contrast to like the Odo Island residents who look like they're from a different fucking planet. like, yeah, they definitely did some like on the spot, just like locale casting there, where it's like, yeah, those aren't actors. But the big one here is Takashi Shimura.
Who plays
Dr. Yamane. Yeah, you know him because this guy's worked with
Kurosawa like crazy. Yes.
Yeah, he's one of his go-tos. He was in Seven Samurai the same year. In fact, Akihiko Hirata was as well. I think he was the antagonist of that film.
Kagemusha, Ikiru.
Ikiru. Yeah. He's very good in that. That's a great movie.
I mean, most of Kurosawa's filmography, much like Ingmar Bergman, it's pretty much all in the Criterion. So I have quite a bit of Kurosawa that I need to catch up on. I need to get started, actually.
Yeah, Ikiru is sad, but good. It's very good, but it is depressing at times.
I had a feeling. It looks depressing from the cover.
Well, I mean, the title means like to live, basically, and it's about an old man. Do the math.
I mean, from what I understand of John Cassavetes, like he's got like a 5-film box set. I'm like, I don't know, man. Those are all like 2.5 hours long, and they sound depressing.
They may even be 3 hours long.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Peter Falk yelling at people. If you like domestic abuse, yeah, no, I don't either. There was a gal that I kind of had a thing for back in the day that I ended up watching one of his movies to try to like have something to talk about with her, and I was like, I'm good.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I forget which Cassavetes I watched, but yeah, I mean, this isn't going to fill anyone in, like if they're familiar with the man's filmography, but it was Peter Falk yelling at Cassavetes' wife, like his real life wife,
probably husbands.
And that's probably most of his movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and it's nothing but just drunk husband and wife tearing the fuck into each other. It was like, this is awful. Yeah, it's good filmmaking, good acting, but not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But what did you think of Odo Island when we get there, Kyle? Because I had some like feelings of warmth when we get the scenes shot there. For some reason, it just like felt nice.
I love black and white films where we're on a beach. I think I'm going to recommend another Criterion release. It's Monsieur Hulot's Holiday. It's a 1950s or 60s black and white French slapstick comedy about a man on vacation. It's slapstick. It's like almost like Pink Panther kind of stuff. And there's just something so charming about it, like just being on the beach in black and white, like a French beach. I don't know, it's really nice. I had the same reaction when I was watching this. I'm like, I want to watch Monsieur Hulot's Holiday now. because it's just so warm. It just feels so nice.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Actually, you may have to send me the title for that one because I'd like to check it out.
I really enjoyed it. It's the perfect movie to get like. There were certain movies you like to watch around the seasons. Like you watch The Thing around Christmas time or when it's getting cold. Or movies around the summertime. I like watching Twister. That's a fun summertime movie. Jurassic Park. Monsieur Hulot's Holiday is my new one for summertime.
Okay, duly noted. But yeah, when we're on Odo Island, basically it's like a really tiny fishing village that feels like a place out of time. Like this feels like from a... If you take your image you have in your head of like modern day Japan and you try to project that onto this, it just doesn't fit. Kyle's making a face at me.
It's on HBO Max.
Oh shit. Okay, well text me the title.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we're on Odo Island and we have Shinkichi, who curiously enough ends up being a character in later Godzilla movies. Like in the 1995 film I mentioned, the bootleg I got, Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. Like, I think his kids or something are the main characters, but obviously that wouldn't matter here. But he's just a young man hanging out with like the village elder, and the two of them spot a raft incoming from the ocean.
I love this guy yelling. It's really funny.
He's got a fucking set of lungs on him, man.
It's funny. I think it's just his tone a little bit too, because
No, he's done this before, Kyle.
Really...
You can tell this is something he does on the regular. He's like, "Holy shit, there's fish!"
Yeah, I had to giggle with that.
Well, yeah, I remember. It's funny because I didn't understand him when I was a kid, but I know that sound. Like I could play that audio back in my head whenever I want on command because it is such a distinct yell. But basically he's just screaming, "Hey, there's a raft!" And they do recover like one of their village members, someone named Masaji, who the only reason I know his name is because it's only said like one more time in the film right before he's killed.
I didn't realize he was killed.
That's the thing. I'll get to it in a second, but when they're in the process of recovering this guy is when we oh, by the way, we do have like some reporters and stuff starting to arrive on the island. Mm-hmm. Specifically one guy who was in the telegraph office during all the chaos and stuff, and he has like a press band on his arm and a camera. So he's at Odo Island like investigating, see if any traces of the fishermen show up there. But he hasn't like brought the cavalry yet. But when we're on the beach, this elder he mentions the name Godzilla. He actually verbalizes that back like it's probably Godzilla. It's like I don't know what's going on, but it's probably Godzilla.
He's like, well, no fish, it's Godzilla. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. And Kyle was asking me about this before we started recording. This is like folklore fabricated specifically for this movie. So this is not like Japanese tradition or anything. It's well documented that the name itself, Gojira, comes from a combination of the English word gorilla and the Japanese word for whale, kujira, and just combining the two of them. Also, there was a rumor that there was a rotund fella on the production staff that they nicknamed that, and then they decided, hey, that's a good name for that big guy over there. Let's call the monster that.
I can see that, yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah,
it's been both denied and approved equal amounts of times. But anyway, yeah, this is when he mentions the name of the titular creature. So he, in the universe of Godzilla, this is apparently local folklore of some sort, that there's a sea monster of some sort. And then we have a dance in the village in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I had that written down. I'm like, dance? What the hell? And then I was like, oh no, it was kind of like the wailing dance. I was thinking more like Sadie Hawkins. Like it was a dance. I'm like, I don't remember that.
Sock hop.
Yeah.
No, we get that in like every other Godzilla movie, but not this one.
We get a wailing style, not a wailing style. Nobody could commit to it like that guy can.
That's one thing I will say. It's like, so there are like 3 universal truths in Asian cinema. Koreans go hard in general. Thai stuntmen go super fucking hard. And Japanese evacuation crowds they're like the top level. They're the top tier of evacuation crowds. When it comes to extras being asked to like leave an area,
Japanese.
They just do it so much better than we do.
Yeah, I think New Yorkers are supposed to be well known for not doing that. Like, they're just jaded. Like,
I mean, they made a joke of that in that Q the Winged Serpent movie, where there's a flying monster picking people off in New York, and the joke is that New Yorkers never look up because they never have a fucking reason to. I was gonna say,
I've seen some of the Eric Andre show. I'm like, there's somebody always trying to fuck with you. It seems like just all the time.
But yeah, we get this dance that's like everybody wearing like Tengu masks or something, and apparently this was all like locals. Just I don't know the name of the island they actually shot on, but yeah, they just got the local villagers to put on a show, and we get some more exposition from the village elder talking about like, yeah, back in the day we used to sacrifice little girls and stuff. Yeah, no big deal.
And it's like, now you got your goddamn unions, so yeah, we're not doing it so much. Like, Jesus, it's like, yeah, we just like throw her out there on a raft, say fuck it. Hopefully,
you gotta file your papers and shit. All this red tape. But following the dance, everybody goes to bed. And this is where Masaji, who we saw, just came in from the fucking ocean. Like, on a fucking handcrafted raft. He barely survived. I can't exactly recall how many instances this has happened in the Godzilla film series, but there's a really big one in Godzilla Mothra King Ghidorah All-Out Monster Attack. It's a good one, by the way. I had to get the whole title out there because I just want to reinforce the point that I do like it. It is an exceptional Godzilla film, mostly because it came out in the early 2000s, and it's one of the first times they really tried to make Godzilla kind of a mean bastard. Like, they actually tried to make him the antagonist of the film, and normally when there's other monsters in the film, he ends up being the good guy, whether he intends to or not. But this one, it's like, no, he's the motherfucker.
Kind of a dick, yeah.
Yeah, he's literally a dick in that one. Like, he's cruel. Because in this instance, we have this guy who just came in, barely survived by the skin of his teeth, and then Godzilla steps on his fucking house in the middle of the night. But not before his little brother like ran out into the rain, because we're in the middle of like a typhoon essentially.
Yeah,
like there's a goddamn hurricane outside. But in that Godzilla movie I mentioned from the early 2000s, there's a very similar sequence where there's like a bunch of young people, like a pension house, like playing ping pong in the middle of the night, which is a thing you do in Japan apparently. And a young woman survives the Airbnb essentially being stepped on, and then when Godzilla makes landfall in like Tokyo, he kills her in the hospital. Gotcha. It's so fucked up. Especially like they make it doubly worse because he actually walks by the building and she's like having a nervous breakdown watching him come towards the building. And then she breathes a sigh of relief when he passes, and then his tail takes out the building. It's so fucked up. But this poor guy gets his house stepped on, and this whole sequence shot in the rain is really dramatic, really moody lighting. I love the miniature effects with all the buildings and the waves crashing on the shoreline and stuff.
Yeah, do we see the helicopter that was sent out earlier? Does it come into frame, or is it in frame when we
first... the camera pulls back, and the helicopter was in the foreground, so the camera settles the helicopter there, and that's the one ugly spot in this otherwise very solid special effects showcase. Is this helicopter just kind of gingerly eases over?
Yeah, it's like that's a toy. That's a model.
It looks really bad. Like they should have had him step on it or something. But it's kind of interesting. They show a little restraint here because when the house is crushed, we do see like a sliver of his silhouette, like below the kneecap. But otherwise, it just looks like, it was a windstorm and the house blew over or something. So the principal cast and we, the viewer, are both kind of like, I don't even know what I just saw, but the music's going fucking nuts, and there's waves and there's rain. It was mass hysteria.
And then we get to the courtroom, the courtroom drama.
Yeah, this was interesting. So we get a busload of island villagers roll up to, I believe this is the Diet Building in Tokyo. This is like Japanese legislation or government, essentially. And they start testifying as to what they saw. And not only that, they're like citing damages.
Yeah.
So like citing how many people were killed, how much livestock we lost in this goddamn rainstorm. But then this is where this movie turns into a B movie every once in a while. And it's kind of embarrassing, honestly, because this movie is exceptional in a lot of ways, and most of it has to do with tone and just the audacity in how they present the story and some of the themes that they're willing to broach in 1954. But the goofy elements come in the form of anything involving science.
I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciate that we are trying to use science. Is this where we get the explanation of Godzilla, of like what it might be, or are we just talking about the damages? Because we have a couple of scenes where we're having a talk.
So this is not where we go into explicit detail about Godzilla or anything like that. But what gets weird here is we have all these villagers who have like firsthand accounts of something attacking their village and, causing a serious damage and killing some people.
Yeah.
And then they just invite a paleontologist to start speaking. It's like
dinosaurs.
Yeah, honestly, it's like it would be like in Dante's Peak having a paleontologist show. It's like, no, shut up, Pierce Brosnan. I want to hear from that guy. I want to hear from Dr. Alan Grant. It's like, I don't have anything.
I do like this. They're like, so this is science now. We have dudes sitting on the science side. Then we have the conservatives. They're like, Judge, I don't think that this is science related. I think it's something else. And I like the village lady's trying to talk, and he's like, shut up! just his quick. He might have said be quiet, but it was a vicious be quiet. Just his demeanor when he's talking like this is fine. Be quiet. And he gets back to his talking. But this lady's not having it. She heckles the hell out of him.
Oh yeah. But basically, our paleontologist, Dr. Yamane, actually this was a connection to Godzilla King of the Monsters. So that would be the most recent American Godzilla movie. This was one that I completely forgot about. That was kind of it put a smile on my face because this is a deep cut. So Dr. Yamane actually mentions Hollow Earth, which is set to play a big role in the current Godzilla franchise. That's where Godzilla, that's how they explain how Godzilla, Michael Myers is his way around the Earth.
Yeah.
Where it's like, dude, I only see him walk. How does he keep beating me from place to place? It's like, oh, well, the Earth is hollow, and he essentially like takes boom tubes from place to place. It's like Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Yeah. But he actually does mention like there are hollows in the Earth that we haven't explored at the deepest depths of the ocean. Perhaps there's some creature that we're not aware of that caused these problems on Odo Island. But we gather together an expedition, including Dr. Yamane and his daughter, and Ogata, who is just he's a himbo. He's a male bimbo. He's a mimbo.
So is he in the military or not, or is this a different guy?
I thought he worked for like a salvage yard or something. Like he worked for a salvage office of some sort, but he's also seemingly involved with the Coast Guard or the Navy in some regard. I don't quite know what his job is. It's
like that twerp from the 2014 Godzilla, how he's like, oh yeah. He's like, now I'm jumping out of a plane. Like, wait, what? Like those are.
So you're a demolitions expert. You're an infantryman, correct?
Yes, but
you're also you're also trained at Halo drops.
Yeah, you're also like jumping from almost outer space from a helicopter.
And you're also familiar with antiquated nuclear devices.
Yeah, he's kind of wearing a lot of hats in that movie.
It's a little bonkers.
That's that movie would have been so much better if they just didn't have him in it, and then also dial that character down a little bit. That actor.
We got into it on that episode. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, you're right. But anyway, we're
going to check out the village. Yeah,
we go to the village, and this is where we get our traditional B movie business of investigating the attack scene after the fact. And this is the kind of stuff I eat this shit up. I love this.
Really?
This is like Godzilla 98 where, everything before the monster's great.
Yes. But it's not...
The build-up,
It's not as much fun in this movie, unfortunately. I needed more of it. There's no fish. Like, the villagers are, like, out there fishing. And, like, we got empty nets, bro. It's Forrest Gump before the hurricane, They got nothing. But, yeah.
We couldn't really afford to put a scarred-up tuna ship on the shoreline or something like that. I mean, you actually could render that with good miniature effects and stuff. And this movie actually did have a fairly decent budget for its day. But you need to remember, this was 1954, and this formula wasn't exactly worn out yet, especially in Japan. Like, maybe here in the States we were starting to get a little overly familiar, but, this is a pioneering effort for Japanese cinema.
Yeah.
But
I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, like, I wish they did a little bit more of the building up.
It would have been nice, yeah, because Godzilla does actually show up very soon.
He does.
But yeah, we investigate some craters in the ground, and there's some decent matte shots here. Very few, but they're very selectively positioned in the film.
Very subtle.
Yeah, very subtle and almost seamless.
Yeah,
you really can't spot them. It's kind of cool.
You have to almost be looking for them to even.
I think you actually do, because they do fit in very nicely. In fact, there was one that I wouldn't have noticed if it wasn't on a Criterion Blu-ray, clear as day.
I did a double take on one. I'm like, wait, that was a matte painting. Damn. Usually you can spot them out.
Yeah, and what's kind of remarkable is that compositing and matte shots and stuff. I don't remember exactly what year Attack of the 50-Foot Woman came out, but if you look at the effects work in that movie as compared to some other stuff, using the same technology, the same techniques, holy fucking shit. You can tell which one is doing it right. And it's certainly not Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Because that woman is semi-transparent throughout the entire film. And I assure you that was not what they intended. That is doing it wrong. But, one of the matte shots in here is just used to expand the destruction of the village just a little bit, just to make it look more damaged than it actually was. And then we step into some craters and we discover, oh shit, these are footprints, very similar to Godzilla 98. And then Dr. Yamane finds a trilobite in one of the footprints. And what's really interesting here is that everybody's scrambling around with Geiger counters. Mm-hmm. And you can hear that crackling noise that, as a kid, I think I had to have, like, my dad explain to me, what is that? Like, what's that noise? What is all that? But they don't really get into it too much. It's just understood. Fucking figure it out. But Dr. Yamane, again, paleontologist, giddy as a schoolboy, he just grabs this thing with his bare fucking hands.
Yeah. So you probably shouldn't be touching that with your bare hands, Professor. He's like, oh, yeah.
One of his aides comes up with the Geiger counter, and it's just like spiking like fucking mad. And he's like, you might want to wear some gloves. Yeah. And then they keep having to yell at all the villagers like, dude, not safe. Get out. Oh, yeah, don't use this well for a while is how they phrase it. It's like, you mean ever?
Yeah, ever.
But one thing that they do point out is that the radiation is localized, so it's not like the entire water supply is radiated. It's just
on the footprints
Yeah, so it's just whatever was here, whatever it touched is no bueno right now. And Kyle, a villager starts banging on a gong up in a tower, so I don't know if this was for just like general security or air raids or what have you, but he's calling an alert to the whole village, and they scramble up to the mountains for some reason, and we start hearing that thump, that stomping noise from the opening titles. And Kyle, you were very excited to get into this, so I'll let you explain what happens here.
Yeah, so I kind of forgot that this is how Godzilla doesn't make his entrance here. We just get a little tease, which is strange that we get a tease of his face. You would think it would just be like a tail, like him just going into the water, and you just see a tail kind of like go underneath. Like that's what I could imagine. No, in this case, the villagers look up and they hear him coming, and they look up over a mountain, and his head just kind of pops up over the top of the mountain just a little bit, and his eyes not moving. It's really funny to see, because usually your monster reveal is like a big deal, and I kind of have to. Roland Emmerich, did he do the 98 version of Godzilla? I'm like, if he was kind of following this pattern, it's like a goofy entrance. he did do that. That's kind of what happened in that movie.
Yeah, it's actually kind of fascinating how similar this is to like King Kong, where Kong just shows up and also has a derpy expression on his face. Like Kong's reveal in that movie, he just arrives. Like he doesn't have a special camera angle or anything. He's just standing there in the frame.
We didn't know how to just do a little foreplay back then. We were just jam it in and get it done. Now we know how to ease in.
Yeah, no, you got to ease into the hot tub, man. That's how you get the most out of it. But he does just kind of like rear up, and he's got the Kermit the Frog eyes, where one he's got the Wally eye, where one's looking at you and the other one's looking
the
somewhere else. Moly. But he lets out one of his trademark bellows, and like everybody who is now at the top of the mountain turns tail and starts running down the mountain. And he gives a couple of roars here, and I think the worst angle we get of him, and mind you, this is in broad fucking daylight, so not flattering to this is a hand puppet, by the way, this version of the suit that we're looking at, which is the glamour one. Like the head sculpt on the puppet, if you ask me, was superior to the full body suit. Mm-hmm. So this is the best it's gonna fucking look in broad daylight. This is the best we got. But the worst angle is when he looks head on into the camera and he goes, ah, yeah, and he like puts one hand up, just like, hi.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that Godzilla caught on. Based on this, it's just kind of funny to see like how far we've come and how, oh man, I can see the rage. It's all right. It's not bad. It's just barely picking up. But yeah, it's kind of funny that this is where it started. Like this is where Godzilla started, was a dude in a suit.
Yeah, no, humble beginnings, and in a lot of ways, it's like just the general tone of this movie wouldn't have you believe that this was the beginning of a franchise. Like it's a fairly dark and moody movie for the most part. There is sequel bait at the very end of it, but it like overall the package is like, we want more of this. Are you sure about that? So yeah, Godzilla has his grand, well, not so spectacular reveal, but it's the 1950s. So of course, Emiko, Yamane's daughter, trips and falls, and she gets a good scream in there, and her himbo has to protect her from nothing. Like Godzilla actually just boogies.
Yo, what are you gonna do, bro? You might as well. You might as well be one of the dudes with a katana. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do with that? Yeah,
Kyle pointed that out. That after Godzilla leaves, and I think the timing of them showing up with these katanas is appropriate because it's after the big lizard has left. Like after the threat's diminished. Now you roll up, huh? Now you're all aggro.
I was gonna do something. Yeah.
I was gonna do something.
Yeah, sit down.
But yeah, Godzilla actually just turns tail and leaves.
Yeah.
He heads out to sea, and we get this really cool shot looking down at the beach.
Great attention to detail. I'm assuming because of the way the suit was, they thought of this. You've got footprints, but you also have his tail dragging in between.
Yeah, and as far as I could tell, this is all pretty much just a painting.
Yeah.
Or maybe something superimposed, like a matte painting on top of an actual view of a beach. But yeah, we just see gigantic footprints headed towards the ocean, and he just left.
Yeah.
And all the villagers are looking down. They're like, oh, I don't want to tangle with that. But we go back to Tokyo, and Dr. Yamane gives a presentation. He brought a slideshow.
Yes, he did.
Of all of his dinosaur action figures in his backyard. These are all like painted renderings of dinosaurs that he's showing off to the Japanese government officials and whatnot.
Well, he's talking about how this what was the thing he found? What's it called?
Trilobite.
This thing he found, he's like, this is from like the Jurassic period or something. Like this has been what we thought was extinct for years, and we have this thing, and the ocean is super deep, and we really don't understand how deep it is. I'm like, he's actually right, but I don't think even then they understood exactly how vast the ocean was.
Well, when in my day, Kyle, dinosaurs were 65 million years ago. Yeah. That's the first big red flag.
Yeah.
But this whole big PowerPoint presentation that he gives to the Japanese government, along with a photo, which is represented by a painting, by the way, because the way that we did that reveal of Godzilla is a matte shot of like the top half of the frame is, hand puppet with a little bit of like fake bushes and stuff at the very base of that frame, and then like a live action plate of an actual mountainside. So I don't know if there was a good way to photograph that, so they just hand painted a rendering of Godzilla peering over the mountain that Dr. Yamane took in the moment. So he shows that to everyone, saying like, "Hey, this shit's legit. Everything."
When you say it like that, it's kind of funny, because I was thinking, I'm like, is that supposed to be a photograph of him? Because there's definitely a guy with a camera, so they kind of tell you like this photo was taken, but you're looking at it like, I don't think that photo was taken there.
You just have one guy in the front row with his finger up, like,
that would have been.
Just cut to him real quick.
Just cut it. Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
But yeah,
it would have been
his whole.
It would have been perfect if it was Leslie Nielsen. One American dude. It was just him. Yeah.
But this whole presentation is about, again, like the depths of the earth and how there are hollow pockets that we can't possibly have explored yet. And him finding a trilobite in this thing's footprint suggests that it's from a different time. Like, it's from the deep, distant past, because trilobites have been extinct for millions of years. Science bullshit aside, one detail that I overlooked, that I actually kind of had to humble myself a little bit and be like, oh, I guess I don't know everything about Godzilla, is that I don't think there is any explicit reference in this film to Godzilla being a product of radioactive bomb testing.
No, it's actually he was supposed to be laying dormant, and the bombing actually woke him up.
Yes, which I personally prefer other iterations of the origin.
Do you like the atomic, the nuclear testing causing
in the 90s, it became this idea that there was somehow a dinosaur that somehow survived to modern times, or at least like the 1940s, and then it was struck by an H-bomb, and it mutated. I always preferred that narrative, but I guess the original origin was no, he was awakened, but he was somehow sturdy enough to withstand the impact of an H-bomb, which I was wrong when we talked about Godzilla 2014. That does make the origin for that version of the character, like fit this version, the original version.
What do you think works better for parable? Like, if you think about nuclear testing is waking up some kind of ferocious monster that can cause damage, or this nuclear testing has can have negative effects on something, causing it.
I've always preferred the latter.
Okay.
That's the narrative I've always carried in my head about the origin of Godzilla, was that we made him, and he's this eternal mistake that we can never be free of. He's now a walking natural disaster that we have no means of getting. It's like a half-life for radioactive waste. It's like, what do you do about it? You put it in a vault and hope it goes away millions of years from now, or whatever.
Or even just developing atomic energy, just in general.
Yeah. I always preferred that, where it's like, I like the idea of us being responsible for making him and having to just pay the price of having to coexist with him.
I concur. Yeah.
But surprisingly enough, I forgot that about this version of the character. So that's on me for forgetting that.
There is a ton of Godzilla movies, so it's understandable that you would forget at least something.
Yeah, it all gets muddled, and it has undergone changes over the years. But yeah, the original version is, no, we woke him up with H-bombs. And somehow he was able to survive the explosion. And actually, there's a production note about how they designed his look. He was meant to look like a burn victim or something. Like, that's why his original color scheme. This is a black and white film, but originally he was intended to be like charcoal gray. A lot of art, like promotional art, especially in America, always drew him as being green. He would eventually become that sometimes, but in this version, he was always supposed to be charcoal gray, and the reason for that was supposed to be he's a burn victim, and even like the crusty like scaling he has on his skin, it's meant to reflect that. We don't exactly know how he's able to breathe fucking fire. That's not. Yeah,
don't worry about
that. But that's actually part of why I always assumed that it was because he was empowered by the nuclear energy or something in some way.
Sense.
But this scene
that would make more sense. Yes.
This scene does end with what Kyle had mentioned earlier, with a public. He's a very image-centric public official. He's like, I don't think it's a good idea to tell all the Japanese folks about this atomic lizard. Yeah. It just doesn't seem like a good idea. It's probably going to cause panic.
You sound like Obama. What are you doing?
I started to realize it mid-sentence, so I was just going with it.
Just step on the gas. It was like, that's definitely his cadence.
He's like, yep, we're going to take care of these folks, make sure it doesn't cause a panic. But then there's a woman who I think is meant to represent like the unsilent majority. So she, like, even her accent, like her Japanese accent, reflects like, oh, she's from the boonies. Like, she just starts like cussing him out in front of everybody. And this is where he has his good shut up.
Yeah,
mid sentence.
I mean, she is great. Pretty ratchety. So you're just like, can you just stop, please?
Oh yeah, she doesn't even get up either. She got her Sunday best on with the cocked hat, and she's just like gesticulating. She doesn't even stand up. And what's funny is she gets her wish. They do, like, I think the very next scene is we get like press releases like, oh, Godzilla's a thing. Be afraid. But then we get to see another staple of just, I don't know, Japanese filmmaking, Japanese storytelling, just jargon. And mass groups of people working in concert, like just communal effort. Like,
yeah,
they're very big on that, and we'll get to that like more so with the 2016 film Shin Gojira. But yeah, we get a whole bunch of like radio and television events here where basically everybody's being made aware that there's a giant fucking reptile out there that is a danger to the public, and the Navy asserts that they're going to get rid of him with depth charges. Yeah. Okay. Good luck finding him. It's called an ocean.
Yeah.
Or, Sea of Japan, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of hard to find things out there. But we get some brewing melodrama in the form of the Yamane household is kind of split on their feelings about Godzilla. Where Dr. Yamane wants to study the thing. He's like, why do we gotta kill it? It's like, dude, we don't even know if we can yet.
I'm sorry, dude. This isn't like an alien life form that's mammalian in how it's presented and like the same size as us. This is a monster the size of a skyscraper. I think we need to put it down because he's gonna keep damaging stuff.
Yeah, I always thought it was kind of neat that obviously he's had character transposed onto him in more recent years, but in his original iteration, I always thought it was perfect that Godzilla was reptilian because of what he represents. Like he's just this irresistible force that he has no will, he has no conscience really. He just does.
Yeah. And
how fitting that it would be a reptile that, cold-blooded, not known to be especially protective or emotional, except for alligators and crocodiles with very tiny babies. But even then, the survival rate on those things is 1% or something. So not the best parents, but I guess there were plans originally to have him be more gorilla-like. And it's no. I don't want to see myself in this thing that's meant to symbolize just mass destruction. In this version of the character, I don't want to form that particular emotional bond.
I know what you mean, that reptilian stupidity where it's just I have no conscience. It's just eat and poop. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and they, even the facial structure on a reptile, they have, those beady, unfeeling eyes where it's like a Komodo dragon can be, death rolling you all over the place and tearing your leg off and just has that same derpy look.
Yeah.
It's like Quint, his description of a shark, where it's it has doll's eyes. It doesn't even seem like it's alive until it's on you. As opposed to a mammal or something, they're very much more expressive.
Yeah.
Just bigger, more easily understood expressions of feeling and emotion. But good call on the production here. But yeah, the Yamane household is split because the elder, he's like wanting to study the creature, and Ogata, the himbo, he's like, dude, we got bombs, we should use them. And it's kind of neat. We had a just an extras moment where after the initial press release about the monster, we just have a scene on like a subway of some like a young couple on a train.
Yeah, I thought that was weird. I was feeling racist because I'm like, that doesn't look like them. Like, it doesn't look like our main two. Like,
it wasn't them.
Because it wasn't them. I'm like, I don't think that's them. I'm pretty sure that's not them. But like, this isn't your. Maybe it's just in older movies. Like, when you have main characters, you really develop them longer. Like, something we kind of glossed over with this movie is like, this first 20 minutes is like, would take like an hour in like a contemporary film. Like, it would take a long time to really draw this out. We'd have to introduce to our characters, really let the monster fester. We bust through that in the beginning.
Oh yeah, no, we would have lots of backstories and quirks. Like, I sorry to bring it back to Dante's Peak again, but in that movie, the first thing we get is backstory for Pierce Brosnan. Then we get introduced to Linda Hamilton. We get to see her like stressed out living scenario and stuff. Like, you get all these layers to assist in like building drama later on. This one, like I said, I think it's very fitting that the director is mostly a documentarian coming into this, because he doesn't seem especially concerned with your typical melodrama, at least in the first half anyway. He just has like a cast of thousands, and it seems like he's more concerned with expressing like different departments.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we have
different angles.
Yeah, we have the reporters, we have the radio dispatch, we have the island residents, then we have the politicians, and then after all of that, it's like, oh, now that we have all the players introduced, now we can start focusing on like the characters a little bit, just in time for things to start going boom. But yeah, we meet this young couple on a train, and they have some choice dialogue here that was cut from the American version of the film, where it's small, like it almost reads as innocuous until you put it in historical context, where they read the newspaper headline saying, oh, possibility of evacuation stuff, and the one guy's like, oh, this shit again? It's like, but then you put it in context, it's like, oh, 1954. Oh, yeah. And he's a young man, so he was alive and like had to deal with that because, not sure if everybody listening is aware, but during World War II, it wasn't just 2 atom bombs that were dropped on Japan. It was bombing of pretty much every populated city in the country for a few years. So air raids were a thing that people of a certain age, these characters included, these young characters included, would have been familiar with.
Yeah, 1939 to 44 was not a great time in world history.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of beefs that likely never will be quashed that were formulated around that time.
At least not for a while.
Yeah, maybe not for a minute.
Maybe. Do we get to our Cyclops meeting? Because it's so strange the way he's introduced in the film. He like sees them off. And
yeah.
And what's with the ribbon? Like the weird line of string that everybody had.
So that was when the Odo Island expedition was put together. Yeah. So when Dr. Yamane and his daughter go off to the island, Dr. Serizawa, who I believe Ken Watanabe's character in Godzilla 2014 is meant to be related to.
I had a feeling.
They have the same surname, so you would assume.
He seemed, because Ken Watanabe kind of seemed like a mixture of the Professor and the Cyclops guy.
Very much so. He's an odd character. I'll just leave
He's just fucking horny for Godzilla in that movie. Yeah, go back and listen to that. We talk about it there.
Let them fight.
It's creepy.
Yeah. And he has a psychic connection with the monster.
Yeah.
It's a little weird. He speaks for all of the Japanese who couldn't be allowed to be in this film. We only need one.
One guy. One Japanese guy.
We only need one.
We have Bryan Cranston. We don't need a whole bunch of Japanese people.
There's a lot of countries that'll object to more than one of them being in this movie.
And we want this to
make our budget back.
We want this to do well in those countries.
Those countries.
Yes.
But yeah, Dr. Serizawa. He is introduced to us in a very odd fashion, where he does see them off, and he's wearing sunglasses on top of his eye patch.
If you weren't paying attention, it's like literally like a second on screen. You just see him real quick, and then like you wouldn't even notice that he has the eye patch. I don't think I noticed it the first time.
Well, yeah, he's got a hat on, he's got sunglasses, and an eye patch.
Yeah,
it's a lot, but he gets introduced to us properly very shortly after this, because the couple from the train, they go a dancing. They have a sock hop on a like a cruise liner or something.
Yeah.
And Godzilla just kind of pops up. Ooh. He does that from time to time in this movie.
Yeah, he does.
Where he just kind of like pops up out of the water, and then he's like, "I'll kill you later."
Is that the guy in the suit doing it?
Yeah.
That's not like. I actually really like those. I like shipwreck movies. I like where shipwrecks happen because it's fucking terrifying. That's like the most terrifying thing I could think of, is being like stranded at sea. So,
have you seen the Poseidon Adventure?
I have not.
Oh, I was not aware that shipwrecks and stuff were a thing for you. You got to see the Poseidon Adventure.
Oh, really?
Holy shit.
Yeah,
that's like the shipwreck movie.
Oh, I love shipwreck movies.
It's about a cruise liner that gets turned upside down.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
It gets hit by a tidal wave and it flips upside down, and they have to escape. It's great, and they remade it with Kurt Russell.
Kind of. It's also kind of why I love The Abyss, because that's kind of along those lines. But I was really terrified. I'm like, is that dude in a suit in water? I'm like, that alone scared me, because I'd be nervous in that suit in water. I'd be afraid of drowning.
He just kind of does a flyby via the water on these people. He doesn't kill them, but it spurs the Japanese government to be like, hey, we got to like steel ourselves and get ready for some shit, because we got a big old lizard in our pond. And meanwhile, one of our reporters who's been with us the entire film, he's almost a main character, in fact. Hagiwara is his name. He goes to visit Dr. Serizawa, who is engaged to Emiko. Meanwhile, every scene we have had with her, she's had this himbo just like kind of floating around her. And they've had a lot of dialogue sprinkled about suggesting that they are together, but they're not really like making it official. And the reason for this is that I want to say that she was put in an arranged marriage.
That makes more sense now.
But she developed feelings for someone else, this very handsome man who has both eyes. He does have depth perception. That is a plus.
He's like Japanese James Dean.
Yeah, no, I mean he's a very handsome man. He doesn't have a whole lot to do in this movie, though. That's why I've been calling him the himbo. But the entire movie is them trying to find the right time to tell this poor one-eyed man that I've been banging your fiance, and they never really find the right time. And when they finally do, it ends up with some fireworks. But
I mean, my man is straight Slytherin down in the basement. I can see why she's like, you know what, I want to go with this normal dude.
Yeah, and she mentions also knowing him like in childhood and thinking of him as a big brother. So it's like, that's not what you want when you're putting him on someone. No, that's not what you want for a relationship. No. But anyway, he's notorious apparently for being a scientist who is very elusive. He's difficult to get a hold of, and he's also not a good interview. So this reporter approaches Emiko saying like, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of this guy. He's apparently doing research that could be relevant to, the current situation with the big old lizard. And she's like, oh, I'll help you out. And maybe I'll, kill two birds with one stone by dropping the bomb on him at the same time. So she goes with him. And sure enough, they go to the doctor's residence. It definitely inspired by like the Universal horror films. Like this. Yeah. His home is not a traditional Japanese home. There's a lot of stonework. He has a creepy lab basement, very much like a Dr. Frankenstein type situation. And the eye patch and the lab coat certainly lend to that as well. No hunchback, but he does have questionable posture. He does turn this reporter away, and he sticks around with Emiko though, and like he cuts her off mid-sentence when she's getting ready to tell him, and he's like, I got something to show you.
Why don't you come down to my basement? Yeah, come on down to the basement.
Yeah, come on down to the creepy basement.
Yeah, I definitely was getting a little bit like Dr. Frankenstein, but there's way more tubes and stuff going on in this basement.
Yeah, less electrical equipment, more tubes.
Yeah.
More glassware. But I did notice, and it looks funny when you first see it, but there's a reason why it's there. He has like a little corner, like in the basement, which is set up like a creepy lab. He just has this little corner with a couple of really cozy chairs.
Yeah, I noticed the chairs too.
With a really cool bookshelf and a little TV.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
So his creepy lab doubles as a man cave.
I think he's spending most of his time down there.
You know, if they had a Famicom or a Nintendo at the time, he would have one.
He'd have a Nintendo Switch down there, yeah.
Yeah, no, he would be playing his Switch on the toilet. Like he spends a lot of time down here. But like I said, that all those details seem silly when you first see them, but they actually are relevant later. But anyway, the centerpiece of this lab setup is a giant fish tank, and here we get the initial reveal of a plot device that will be very important later in the film. Basically, he has this little, it's like a dog dish almost,
yeah,
that he pulls from a cabinet, and he throws this little ball of something in with the fish, and we get some really cool Dutch angles here. Like, I love the close-up of the two of them watching what happens in the tank. Her reaction is, typical 1950s damsel in distress stuff, but the slight tilt to the angle and like the kind of soft focus they put on both of them looks really good. This movie is very well shot.
Oof.
And the editing is very brisk. There are certain instances where there's whole scenes that don't need to be here, but the length of the average scene in this movie is surprisingly short for a 50s movie. Like it kind of like we jump from location to location and conversation to conversation pretty rapidly. It's kind of surprising, actually.
Yeah, it does move pretty quickly.
But anyway, we don't actually see what happens in the tank, but it was apparently shocking enough that she had to scream and recoil in terror, and when she goes home right afterwards, she is not in a talking mood.
Yeah, she walks in and just walks right back out. I like a handsome guy. He sits down and he like acts like he's reading when she's in the other room. He's just kind of getting ready to turn the page, and he's not actually reading. But then she just like leaves.
Yeah, she does come back with drinks later, which I want to say is a very Japanese move, where it's like, it's like I just need a minute to collect myself, and then I'm going to like come back stronger than ever. Like I'm gonna put on a happy face for the whole room.
This might have been a cultural thing, but I noticed that she kind of caters to her dad. Like she kind of like
very much so.
She kind of like squats down or bows to get his bag, and then she kind of presents him with drinks, and he asks where she is at one point. But yeah, I guess it was kind of...
She takes his jacket off without him even looking at her.
That's what secretaries did in the 60s, apparently, too. Like, can you not take your own jacket off, dude? Just walk in there and take it off.
Yeah, no, it's very much a cultural thing. There actually were Japanese directors, like, in the 50s and the 60s that really spotlighted actresses and female stories. Not this one, though. This movie, the ladies have no agency whatsoever. They're just kind of here. Although it does need to be said, the resolution of this story does hinge on her actions, kind of, almost. So I'm trying to give her credit, but
I got so excited and kind of scared when the sirens go off. Like in a movie when there's sirens going off, you're like, oh, this is where it's about to happen. This is exciting. But I was also thinking back to, what was that video game movie we did?
Silent Hill.
Silent Hill, yeah. And that, for some reason, that kind of popped in my head, too. I'm like, oh, it's a scary part. I'm like, it's Godzilla. It's not that. It's going to be that scary.
Well, speaking of which, we do get some air raid sirens in the middle of this awkward evening conversation. Good timing, Godzilla.
Perfect. This is actually where I was just like, oh my god, can we get to... Then the sirens went off. Like, oh, here we go. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, so curiously enough, Godzilla making landfall. So Godzilla actually showed up, like, barely 20 minutes into the movie. Like, we saw his head, like, barely 20 minutes into the movie. But him making landfall is almost identical, like in terms of time code, as King Kong. It's about 45 minutes.
Yeah, it is about that.
It's kind of neat how that worked out. But the air raid sirens go off, and all the men of the household take off to do God knows what. There's really nothing to be done other than get to an elevated position and watch your countrymen get trampled.
Yeah, I like your best bet is to go out to the widest, like away from buildings and stuff that can fall on you. That's your best bet.
Yeah, they just go up on a grassy hill and watch. And Godzilla arrives in the bay, and they try to stop him with machine guns.
Yeah, dude, that's not gonna work.
It's like, have you seen the size of this thing? But yeah, he curiously enough, very similar to how he has his initial reveal with his face. He just kind of appears on land. So there's no shot of him getting up out of the water. And I want to say that was probably a logistical thing. Because the full body suit for this thing, which you would probably have to have him wear, the suit actor that is, for a shot of him coming up out of the water. One, it probably looks like dog shit when it's coming out of the water.
Yeah.
Because it's waterlogged and it's not built to hold its structure and stuff, so he'd look all bloated in parts. Like when an air pocket gets into your swim trunks, he'd look like that, and you don't want that.
Yeah, there's certain times when he's walking around, just occasionally you'll see the suit, because like you said, it's not meant to like stay sticking out. Like it's like a toy almost, where it just like it'll squeeze.
Yeah. The other thing is that the full suit weighed over 200 pounds.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so just stepping up out of the water probably was asking too much.
That's how you die.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen what the fellow who wore the suit looked like. He was a very small man, but apparently he was like fisherman strong. Like,
gotcha.
Real strong, real tiny. But this hero, his name is Haruo Nakajima. My dad texted me when he died because he knew I would care. But curiously enough, very similar to like Paul Revere. Do you know the story of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride? Is
he the one the British are coming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to do a school report on him way back in the day, and I always thought it was fascinating that history remembers that anecdote, but in actuality he got captured. I think Samuel Prescott actually finished the ride on his behalf, and similar to that, history remembers Haruo Nakajima as the original Godzilla suit actor, but there was also an assistant named Katsumi Tezuka who also wore the suit for some insert shots here and there. So,
okay, he is just adorable. He's just an adorable
he
old man.
He is the kindest looking old man. Like he reminds me of some of my relatives. He has like, he just has such a happy look about him. Yeah. And seeing him do the Godzilla walk when he's not wearing the suit, because people would always ask him to do that.
Oh, really?
He would demonstrate his acting process without wearing the suit. It's so charming. He always had a smile on his story for everybody. He was a great guy.
Yeah, he looks like a sweet guy.
But yeah, apparently he passed out several times in the suit.
Of course he did.
I think the first time he wore it, he fell over and needed assistance to get up. He literally fell and could not get up, and he could only wear the thing for like 3 minutes at a time before the heat and the lack of oxygen would get to him.
I can see
and
that.
he did this over and over and over again for years. The constitution on this man, truly impressive stuff. You had to be a tough guy to do that.
I wonder if he got paid decent.
I hope he did. I really hope he did, because he deserved it.
Yeah.
Because it's not as apparent in this film, but in many of the other Godzilla films where he portrayed the character, I don't think it was until the 80s that he stopped doing the gig, because he got old and beat up. His physicality, he actually did have a way of moving that it's kind of like Jason Voorhees. Like, there's a reason why Kane Hodder is the top pick for like that's Jason. Like, all those other stuntmen, all those Dick Warlock types. I don't think Dick Warlock ever played Jason, but Kane Hodder was the one who really put his stamp on the body language and the way he carried himself and stuff. And same with this era of the franchise. It's like, if you had a different guy in the suit, you probably could tell.
He's very bow-legged too. I noticed that.
Yeah. He's very bow-legged.
Very bow-legged.
But yeah, Godzilla makes landfall, and the black and white photography is fantastic here. Godzilla is cast in heavy shadows, highlights on like his dorsal spines and stuff, but for the most part, he's just like washed in blacks. And there's a lot of composite shots here that, again, when compared to something like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman or something, doesn't hold a candle. Some of these composite shots look tremendous, and a lot of it does have to do with the fact that they're using heavy shadows. And the seams between the plate shots and the mats are virtually imperceptible. But he goes walking through like the shipyard, and the big highlight here is probably in an homage to King Kong. He gets on the train tracks, and he steps. Like, the timing of this hit is beautiful, because like there's this train barreling down the tracks, and his foot comes down the second it gets to him.
Yeah.
And watching this train derail, and like, you know, the conductor hit the brake at the last second, and just the chaos that unfolds, it's really, really impactful stuff. And a big difference between the American cut and the Japanese cut of this film is Japanese cut's more brutal. There's a handful of shots here and there that are longer and have more detail in regards to the actual impact of the destruction. So during this train wreck sequence, the American version just shows like him hurling toy train cars around and stuff, you know, fun stuff.
Yeah, we don't want another King Kong fiasco where we're showing some brutal ass shit.
Yeah, we don't want to drop any women from extreme heights, or, you know, put any fangs in tribesmen's assholes. But the Japanese cut has like not inserted, but included in this sequence, like lots of shots of people with like head wounds, like hiding under rubble and just being in awe of what's happening. So we actually get to see like the real human impact of not just like the property damage, but like, yeah, people are there and they're hurt and they're scared.
Yeah, we wouldn't want American audiences to get an idea of what we were doing to other countries at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why this film is so historically significant, is that it does explore a lot of the territory that B movies in the States and most other movies of this nature, any monster movie, really wasn't terribly confident with tackling. It's like, that's punching above our weight. Like, you know, I made this movie on a weekend on a Roger Corman budget, on a bet, mind you. We're not really trying to tell anyone anything with this movie. This movie, I had an agenda, and it really does effectively get its point across, if you ask me.
I wonder it would be different, but how much different the American film industry would be if we kept with King Kong, with that kind of violence in movies early on, and hadn't been censored.
That's a very good question, because that was a very long stretch of time, and I mean, we were in the middle of World War II for a good chunk of that.
But in the 50s, we were just not. It was all just G stuff, PG.
Well, we talked about before with King Kong, where in the 50s we were casually eating hamburgers and hot dogs, not thinking about where it's coming from and stuff. Whereas roll it back 20 years, it's like, meat, that shit's hard to come by, man.
America's great. We got all this meat and stuff. It's just right here. It's super, super great. It's not meat.
Yeah, for real.
I guess this would probably be a good time to discuss, because this whole scene, if you've never seen Godzilla, it's all miniatures. We have a guy in a suit stomping around miniatures, and it's spectacular. Like, you can't really do it justice without seeing it. Like, it's really incredible to see. But it's interesting that this is the way that the Japanese decided to do a monster flick, whereas how King Kong was, it was stop motion. So we're actually just manually moving these things, a little bit by bit by bit. And I don't know how else to say what we would say like CGI, but it's not CGI. It's whatever it was at the time. Instead, Japanese were like, we're just going to put a dude in a suit and we're going to do these immaculate models. But how did they choose the scale? How did they go about it that way instead of copying what America did with King Kong?
I have to assume it had to do with time, because stop motion is incredibly time consuming.
Well, I feel like building a model is just as time consuming.
But you have a workshop that's working on all of those models and stuff, whereas Willis O'Brien is who you had. Yeah. The guy did it, and it took months of his life to do some of those sequences and stuff. Whereas this, it's like you have live props that you can set up and destroy or rebuild, and then you can film everything live and on the spot. So I want to say that was probably the chief reason as to why they did that. I don't know if stop motion ever has really had much of a foothold in Japanese cinema, but
so I don't think it has. Not that I can't think of like early stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly think of examples, but no like distinct periods or distinct creators. Like just a sprinkling here and there, like in the 90s, like stuff I was watching on VHS and stuff. But the suitmation technique was an interesting choice. I think it really worked out for them. They basically created an art form.
Yeah,
that's Tsuburaya basically pioneered an entire special effects theory and art form unto itself. And choosing the scale, as far as I recall, the reason they had Godzilla be about, I think he's supposed to be 50 meters in this film, maybe 55, was that it was slightly taller than the largest building in Japan at the time.
Okay.
Or at least in Tokyo anyway. And also, other important details of him breathing fire, not only is it cool, but the other part of it was that at this point in history, the majority of Japanese buildings were constructed of wood and would burn easily. And of course, coming hot off the heels of World War II and all that ugliness, a lot of bombs were dropped, and the audience probably was familiar with some of this imagery of wood housing being set ablaze.
Gotcha.
But yeah, the scale had to do with having him be basically bigger than anything that he would be running across. And it's funny because they would continually make him larger as the series would go on until the 2000s, where they shrunk him back down. But I think he topped out in Japan anyway, at about 100 meters, so like double the height. And it's so cool looking at Godzilla 1984 because the sets are the real star of the show in that one, because he's like 80 meters tall in that movie, and there's a sequence of him in 1984 Tokyo where the skyscrapers are way above him, like it's actual scale. Like they actually had to build props to suit that scale, and it's no wonder they didn't really do that for many of those movies going forward, because that shit's hard to do. Yeah. But Godzilla's initial landfall results in him just like crashing through the shipyard and the railroad tracks. But then he just kind of quickly goes back into the bay, like gone as quickly as he appeared, which leaves us, the populace, kind of reeling and not sure what to do here. So they scramble like the self-defense force. So we get to see, again, documentarian film at work. So we get to see like a whole bunch of military vehicles scrambling and stuff, and setting up artillery and whatnot. But then the plan at this point is to set up a electrical...
God.
Taxpayers' dollars at work.
Holy shit, this is dumb. This is not for the movie. I'm just saying, like, this is a dumb move for the Japanese government. Like, this is how we're going to take care of this. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say, I'm just thinking of the taxpayers and whatnot, and you'd have, like, some fiscally conservative folks just being like, motherfucker.
There's no way this would get passed. No
Not
way.
in my Japan.
No, Godzilla would have, if this happened in America, Godzilla would have already decimated 80% of the United States, and there'd still be people like, I don't think it's actually happening. I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to spend the money for it. I don't think it's really real.
Well, keep that thought in the back of your mind when we get to Shin Godzilla.
Okay.
No, I'm serious. That The movie, I think, is officially classified, partially anyway, as a comedy.
Oh, okay.
And that's where a lot of the comedy comes from. Is a political satire.
I would actually be terrified if a Godzilla came to the U.S. right now, because I'm like, there's no way we would handle it the way that we need to. There's 0% chance we would handle it the way we need to.
Maybe someone would push the button finally.
This
like
is
somebody's been itching to do it for decades.
Would y'all just shut up? Okay, this is what's gonna happen. Shut up! Just shut up! All right. Seriously. But so there's 2 parts to this. So we have a big evacuation of about 1,500, or there's a couple of miles away from these power lines. Like, we have to evacuate the folks from there. And we have to do the circumference of the island, I believe.
Of all of Tokyo Bay.
Of all of Tokyo Bay.
Look it up on a map. It's not insubstantial.
With these power lines, I also like the way we show the power. It took me a second. I'm like, wow, this looks really good. And then I saw it just shift slightly. I'm like, oh, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, there's a couple of shots that look real good until it just jitters just a little bit.
You were so close.
And they were so close.
So close. But yeah, these power lines, I'm like, guys, they hadn't seen Jurassic Park yet. So they didn't. This isn't going to work. Life finds a way.
Well, I mean, they actually, because this is a Japanese film and because this is a documentary filmmaker, we do have some procedural elements, because I don't know what it is about the Japanese psyche, but I'm guilty of this too, man. And I'm not even from there. Like, procedures are just eat it up. Just get into the minutia of weird, like, esoteric processes.
Maybe you should go to law school.
I'd probably be good at it.
You'd probably be pretty good at it.
I don't have the I don't have that magician's like quality to me where I like to be right or I like to get one up on people. Like, I don't have that. I don't have that. I'm not the guy at the Dungeons and Dragons table who likes to, read up on the rules and like lawyer you out of stuff and like get one up on you because of it.
I'm quiet about it. I'm more of like I have it but don't need it. Kind of like
that's how I am actually.
Like, I know you're wrong, but I'm gonna let you have it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's incredibly rude to call people out on things like that, especially in casual conversation. But yeah, it is a weapon. I do have a Batman utility belt of that at my disposal.
Don't make me use it.
But see, that's what makes me a hero, Kyle, is that I have an atomic bomb at the ready, but I've never dropped it.
Yeah.
I'm above that. But yeah, this plan is to set up these power lines, and I mean, long story short, Godzilla shows up.
Dude, it takes him no time. He just like
no time.
I'm just racking my brain trying to think of a situation, a movie where they put all this time and effort into stopping something, and it does absolutely nothing. I know it's happened in other movies, but I couldn't think of the example.
But yeah, the procedural aspects that I was hinting at earlier was we do actually get to see the people working at the power station, and we are shown footage of them being competent and on the job.
Yeah.
But what you could have done is insert just like a camera pan over to like a Japanese nedry with a messy desk. Yeah. And that's like, oh, that would be an alternate cut. It's like, oh no, Godzilla got through the electrical barricade, not because he was stronger than the electrical field, but because of gross negligence on the part of one Denny Sunedori. But yeah, he gets through the electrical field, and they're like hitting him with the howitzers and stuff as he's coming through. And this is where we get introduced to his fire breath, which we'd only seen him do underwater, so we never actually got to see it. We just saw like a flash of light, and he melts a whole bunch of these towers. He blows up a bunch of military hardware, and he's just shrugging off everything they throw at him.
Yeah, that's doing nothing.
And thus begins like a 15, 20-minute rampage?
Yeah, he's like going, and he's going into a state of Hulkamania right now. Nothing
he's hulking out.
nothing that the Japanese military is doing to him is stopping him. It's only making him more powerful, honestly.
Yeah. So, what phase of Hulkamania would this be? Is it when he goes ooh, or is it when he does the Dikembe Mutombo finger?
I think it's the Mutombo.
Or is it when he does the bicep flexes? It's all three.
There's a beautiful moment if you've ever seen the clip. I think it's when Michael Jordan was playing against Mutombo. Michael Jordan was like, they were kind of like talking shit, and Michael Jordan's like, "Oh yeah, watch this." Closes his eyes, makes the free throw. Ugh. It's such a good move.
Shit on your face.
You need to watch that documentary, Trevor.
I know, Kyle. This is the new Wayne's World quote for the show. So folks at home, we used to have a thing where somehow we would end up quoting Wayne's World literally every episode.
Dude, it's still happening. I don't know if you've noticed that. We've pretty much still been doing it.
Yeah, it's so subtle, though.
Yeah.
We just kind of rush past it because you and I know it, but
Yeah.
we're not going to draw attention to it. That's what makes it funny. But now, apparently, Save the Last Dance, or whatever is it?
Save the Last Dance. It's just the Last Dance.
Save the Last Dance,
There's no Julia Stiles in that documentary.
Oh, Julia Stiles. But yeah, Godzilla goes on a rampage here. We get to see all sorts of nasty carnage, like him breathing fire on people, not just buildings. Tons of fire effects here. My God, 220-pound suit. I know they cut it in half sometimes so he could just like wear the feet because it was so dangerous for him to be wearing it all the time. But the heat of the costume, the weight of it, combined with just the constant flames, oof, it must have been hazardous. But like I said, Tsuburaya, he loves blowing shit up, and he gets to do it quite a bit in this whole sequence, which like I said is like 20 minutes long. It's just constant destruction, wanton destruction. But Ifukube's score really plays a huge part in like the emotionality of these sequences, where we have this like ponderous lumbering theme for Godzilla just like trampling buildings and stuff, and then whenever the military shows up, that the march from the opening title plays, and it gives you like a little hint of hope, and then he very quickly blows them away with his fire breath.
Yeah.
And what's really cool here, and this is something that was cut from the American version, that understandably so, this differs from a lot of B movies from this era. After the tanks come after him and like try to push him back, like as a final stand, like in the streets of Tokyo, there's a radio dispatch sent out saying, "Stop shooting at him. Just focus on put out fires." They send out like a mass notice to everybody out there in the streets, like just, we're not gonna win this fight. Just put out fires and save people.
I'm picturing
and that's a huge difference from how monster movies of this era were portrayed.
Picturing now Godzilla looking and seeing the tanks when they start shooting at him, and him going, "It looks like they have an RV," and
and the quarterback is toast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always thought that was really fascinating. That I think that's very much a Japanese mentality kind of thing. Like, there's a phrase that I use it all. I don't use it all the time, but I think it a lot. Is shikata ga nai. Basically means nothing can be done. And it's my understanding that it's kind of just like a philosophy that came about as a result of Japan being a very environmentally unstable location. So you have typhoons, you have tsunamis, you have earthquakes, still to this day.
Yeah.
It's a very environmentally volatile place. So imagine living in ancient times and just like, Gam got carried away by the wind. What do we do? It's like, well, you can be angry at the wind, or you can just kind of say, okay, that happened, and move on. And that's kind of a very Japanese sentiment.
Never considered that.
Bad things happen, and you just have to be okay with it.
Interesting.
Which is, I personally, this is taking things for a weird walk, but actually I've kind of thought that that's partially responsible for some of the political tensions in that region. So that you have a culture that's kind of built upon moving on and pushing things in the past into the past, where it's like even the idea of like impermanence is a concept it's all over Japanese culture. The idea of things not lasting forever, where you have like an object or something that it's like, I will have it for a while. It'll rot, and I'll be okay with that. You have that philosophy, and then you have it rubbing shoulders with other cultures that maybe don't share those sentiments. And so all those historic grudges and stuff, you have one culture that's fairly okay with, being like, okay, shit happened. And then other cultures that are like, no, like you don't get to do that. So it creates some tension there. It's a difference of understanding and just core beliefs. But yeah, Godzilla is just laying waste to the city, and everything's in flames. We get a couple of highlights here in the form of some really cool shots of like the aviary, like the bird cage, where you can see his head through it. It's just a really cool shot with like a bird cage superimposed in front of his face. We get a cool composite shot of him like stepping onto a river, like a bridge basically, and like it causing the river to overflow into the streets.
That was cool.
That was cool. And the radio tower is particularly brutal, where there's this poor reporter guy who's like doing a live broadcast as Godzilla's walking up to him, and he's just like saying everything that comes to mind live on the air for the masses to hear. He's doing a report, and Godzilla ends up biting the tower and pushing it down. The last thing the guy says is like, "Well, this is it, folks. Bye." Like literally, that's what he says, and then a tower goes down. He dies. The Japanese Diet Building goes down, so that's like their main government facility in Tokyo. So he just walks straight through it. And finally, when he's done, Tsuburaya gets to express his love for jet planes, and have a bunch of toy planes on fishing line show up about 20 minutes too late to shoot some missiles at Godzilla as he's leaving. So it's like, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. Godzilla's just kind of like, what? What? He's leaving, and he doesn't seem to care too much. And it's a curiosity with the special effects here, but like none of these rockets actually impact him. You just keep zooming past him. But yeah, eventually he leaves, and the general public seems to be very, just like more like angry than anything else. Like down, of course, because horrible stuff just happened. But the Shinkichi, the young man from Odo Island, all he can say is like basically the equivalent of "fuck" or "shit." Yeah. Like that's all. It's like that scene in The Wire or whatever.
Like, what are you supposed to do?
But one of the scenes that was cut extensively for the American version is the immediate aftermath. So we get like a really great miniature shot of like the remains of Tokyo, and you can tell that they sourced some photographs from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But more than that, the hospital scenes were gutted for the American release, because this stuff's pretty rough. Because you have like all sorts of people laid out on stretchers, and the makeup effects aren't particularly grisly. But there's this one part where like a little girl's mom dies, and she is just howling.
Yeah, we weren't ready to humanize the Japanese at this point. Yeah, we're like, no, we're not. Yeah, we did some awful things to them, but we don't want you to worry about that right now, okay? Because a lot of us that did that are still in office.
Yeah, no shit. But yeah, the scene with the little girl in particular is pretty rough. And like Emiko is there, her himbo is also there. They're just trying to do their part, like helping out survivors and stuff. And a lot of these images, more than likely, were pulled directly from war times and stuff. And it's not brutal by today's standards, but again, if you put it in context, it's pretty rough. But this is where Emiko comes to a decision to tell her himbo, Ogata, about what Serizawa had shown her earlier. So we the audience didn't actually see what she saw, but she was told never to tell anyone about this by her supposed fiancé. And so she breaks her promise and she tells Ogata about it, and we cut back to her seeing what happened in the tank, and basically it's all those fish in that really grimy fishbowl, by the way. Yeah. It's like that water is murky. Those fish couldn't have been happy anyway. They turn to skeletons, and then they turn to nothing. They just turn to dust, basically. And basically this substance that Serizawa pioneered is called the Oxygen Destroyer. And funny enough, this actually was in Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Yes.
The missile that they hurl at him out of nowhere that wounds him is like called the Oxygen Destroyer. It's a weird reference. It comes out of nowhere. You either noticed it or you didn't.
I remember that now, and I don't know if at the time I didn't make that connection. I just can't remember.
They easily could have just called it a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
But I think they did that because that would have been contradicting themselves, because the whole
premise is that he eats the nuclear stuff.
Yeah, and in the opening sequence of the previous movie, we see him get hit by one, and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I kind of want to watch that.
I guess that's why they would do that.
I kind of want to rewatch that 2014 one again.
Go for it. Maybe it's on HBO.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
I know King of the Monsters is. But anyway, this substance is called the Oxygen Destroyer, and apparently it eliminates all the oxygen in an environment and turns whatever's inhabiting that environment into goo, into fluid, as he calls it. And it's basically hinted that this weapon is equivalent to like a nuclear device. Like this is a brand new innovation in weapons technology that could change the world. So he's trying to find a good use for it, like some good use for it, but until then he doesn't want to reveal it to the public because politicians and militaries could exploit it and fuck us forever.
They will. They will exploit it.
So his mindset is correct. Like, you probably should keep this under your hat. And he is approached by Emiko and Ogata. They both show up, and I like how Ogata shows up in a suit because he needs to feel tough in this moment. It's like, dude, I've been fucking her. And that thing you've been keeping secret, she told me about it, and I need it. It's like, whoa, you do that in my house?
In my house? In my house?
But the conversation goes into the basement, and Serizawa is not having any of this shit. He will not comply. And we get this curious moment where Ogata starts wrestling with him because he's trying to take the Oxygen Destroyer by force, and the camera pans behind the fish tank, a new fish tank. He has new fish. And we hear a scuffle, but we don't actually see any of it. But the one-eyed man got one up on him because the himbo has a head wound after this. And I like that apologies are in short order. Like, immediately after this little bit of violence, he's like, oh, dude, I'm hella sorry. Just don't touch my stuff. I just get a little heated when people mess with my stuff.
Don't touch my stuff. Yeah.
But the real kicker here is these two hot young people can't convince the good doctor to relinquish his weapon. But the TV that I had mentioned earlier in his man cave just happens to be on, and a broadcast of a young women's choir starts playing, and it's like a prayer to basically all the people who have passed, and for the hope of the nation. And this composition always stirs emotion in me.
Really?
I think it's an original composition. Both the melody and with the choir, it's a really powerful piece of music, if you ask me. Even as a kid, I would like pause. I'd have reactions to it because I do think it's powerful. Like, it actually does carry a lot of emotion to it, and it's doubly effective because it not only worked for me, it also works for the characters in the film, because Serizawa hears this, and he actually turns it off mid-broadcast, and he's like, enough of this shit. Like,
enough with the clown.
Yeah, he's had enough of this schmaltzy horse shit. And he's like, okay, I get it. Like, a lot of people died, and I have the means to maybe prevent more people from dying. So he makes it known that, like, okay, I will hand over the Oxygen Destroyer, but as long as I know about it, as long as I have the formula in my head of how to create it, humankind isn't safe. And he starts burning his papers, and Emiko like collapses and starts crying, and he tries to console her. And I think what's implied here is she knows what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Like, she knows that he hasn't said he's going to off himself, but he's totally going to off himself.
He's totally going to,
But thus begins the final chapter of the film, where Ogata insists on going in a diving bell suit down to the bottom of Tokyo Bay, along with Dr. Serizawa, to deploy the oxygen destroyer at Godzilla's feet. And what did you think of this sequence, Kyle? Because it's underwater photography, which oftentimes is a bit of a red flag, especially, not especially, but exclusively for films of a certain age. Like some of those James Bond movies got a little dive crazy at some points. They drag serious ass. I'm curious if you got that vibe from this sequence.
I was thinking more along the lines of, was it 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Where it's like...
Same year, Kyle.
Oh,
same year.
Interesting. Maybe it was it was just all the rage at that point.
Underwater photography, I don't know how long it's been around, but I suspect it was fairly new.
This, I feel like it could have taken a lot longer, but it doesn't take too terribly long.
Yeah, it's surprisingly well put together.
Yeah.
It if you ask me, it could use a little bit of trimming, and in fact, the American cut does excise some of these shots, because we really don't need to see two people awkwardly fumbling around in literal diving bell suits, like not scuba gear.
I guess the novelty in in the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I guess that's why we spent a little bit more time on it. I mean, I think you could have just cut some of that out, because what do we really want to see? We want to see the squid monster at the end.
I know I did when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But basically it's just two guys fumbling around, and the whole time I was rewatching this sequence, I was thinking to myself, man, people are nuts.
Yeah, right?
Just the idea of going down in that kind of diving suit, where it's like, okay, so you mean I'm in just a leathery suit with a steel helmet, and my only connection to the surface is a rope and a garden hose?
There's an excellent series. I think it was on AMC. I watched the first season. It's called The Terror, and it was about that arc. They were trying to find the passage through the Arctic, basically.
Yeah, the top of the world.
Yeah, and 3 ships ended up being frozen and abandoned there. There was definitely like cannibalism and stuff, but one of the scenes they have is one of the earliest. I'm sure this was, I think, like early at the time. Was a guy being lowered in one of these old suits, and I'm just like, there's no way I would get into that fucking thing, especially then.
No, God, no. Just watching these people who were probably set up in the most safe of circumstances possible at the time. No, no, fuck that.
Yeah, I'd like to. When did people figure out about the bins? Like, how long did it take people to figure that stuff out?
Oh, yeah, for real. I have no idea. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of people suffered some serious symptoms without really understanding why for a very long time. For a very long time. It's like hanging out with your friends doing diving contests and shit. It's like, oh, fuck, I don't feel so good.
A buddy of mine, he's an underwater welder, and he did stuff in Lake. I think it was on Lake Washington. It was like north. I think the school's on the north part of Lake, or no, Lake. Lake Union.
I actually know the school you're talking about.
Yeah,
I've seen it.
Yeah, that's where he was. So he came home, and he left in like the middle of the night, and I didn't know what was up. He went to the emergency room because he was having the bends, and they put him in like an oxygen decompression chamber for a while, for like 8 hours. And the guys at the school got mad at him. They're like, "Why didn't you come here?" And he's like, "I didn't realize that. Like, I didn't realize that that's what it was when I went to the hospital." Yeah, he had to sit in a chamber for 8 hours to decompress.
Oh, thankfully, I had it hammered into my head from a very early age that decompression chambers are a thing that you have to do in order to explore the deep sea. Thanks to movies like Sphere and Deep Star 6 and shit like that.
I need to watch Deep Star 6.
The Abyss.
The Abyss was like they had to stay 8 hours to I think it was like 16 hours to get started. He's like, you have to wait 2 weeks to go back up. I'm like, that's insane.
Yeah, no, my dad explained to me about pressure and stuff from when I was pretty young, and thanks to movies, I got the hint.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to explode.
Yeah.
It would be the kind of thing where I'd be in a situation where that wouldn't be relevant at all. I'd just be like, in an underwater habitat like 5 feet below the surface. Be like, whoa. Like, do I got to decomp or what?
Now, free diving, you don't have to decompress.
Yeah, but I'd still ask. Like,
Yeah.
Whoa, are you sure?
That was what my question was when I saw those like crazy free divers and stuff like that. I'm like, don't you have to decompress? Like, no, you're holding your breath.
Yeah, be like, whoa, dude, I seen D-Star 6. I know what happened to Miguel Ferrer. He exploded. Like, I've seen this movie before. I'm not going to be that guy. Anyway, back to Godzilla.
Yeah,
So,
it is kind of crazy like that this is how Godzilla gets it. And it's kind of cute, too.
I've always thought this was a curious end to this movie, actually.
It is...
And a lot of that has to do with my confusion over the origin of the monster. Because, like I said, in rewatching this film that I've seen the American version of anyway, probably a dozen times, and Japanese version probably 2 or 3 times. With me having that misunderstanding about where the monster came from, I always thought it was strange that it's like, okay, so he was born from a weapon of mass destruction, and he met his end via a different weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
It's like, the allegory is a little confused there, where it's like, what's the message we're trying to get across here?
Fight fire with fire.
Yeah, it's like, when in doubt, blow it up harder.
Yeah, basically.
But yeah, it's strange no matter how you slice it, but it is a way to end a movie. Although, there is an alternate story that I don't know if it's been explored yet. Maybe in future Godzilla sequels this is something they could do, but what about like well, no, they did this with that Netflix animated series that I haven't watched. There's a 3-part Godzilla animated series, like a series of movies, where the premise is Godzilla is just this ongoing problem for the planet, not just Japan, and other monsters emerge, and it gets so bad to the point that humanity has to leave Earth, only to return thousands of years later, and Godzilla's still there.
Oh, god damn it.
And he's like bigger and meaner than ever.
Damn it! Yeah. So cute.
But I'm just like saying, like, wouldn't it be interesting to have like a contemporary Godzilla movie or something where it's like, oh, well, I guess we don't have a way of getting rid of him, so what would the world look like if you lived in constant threat of a giant monster just showing up someday?
Well, he's a reptile, so he can drown. So what about cement galoshes?
He's Godzilla. He lives underwater generally, so that's out the window. He's not a reptile. He's a what's it?
But
if you did immobilize Kyle, I'm gonna stop this thread here because we haven't watched Shin Gojira yet.
Okay.
Because this discussion will come up again, but we'll get there in a few weeks. Anyway, yeah. Long story short, the oxygen destroyer is deployed, and Ogata gets kicked up to the surface against his wishes, and he's like screaming for Serizawa as the good doctor watches and confirms that the device is working. Like, Godzilla's suffering, he can tell it's doing its job. And immediately after that, he wishes the happy couple, which I don't even think they ever like really got around to telling him what was up, but he kind of figured it out.
Yeah, they're pretty good looking. You should be able to figure it out.
And he's there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's at that house all the time. I'm sure the dad knew what was up.
I did like that scene. We missed that, but yeah, I did like that scene.
Yeah, there's a fun confrontation between the elder Yamane and Ogata where they do actually butt heads.
Yeah,
he's like, get out of my house.
He's like, get the fuck out of my house. I'm like,
yeah. It's a dad move.
Yeah.
It's an old dad move. It's an old dad with a daughter move.
Yeah. I know what's going on here.
Well, it's a short dad with a daughter move because he's a tiny man.
Yeah.
You gotta use those words and that body language because you ain't got anything else to work with. But anyway, yeah, the good doctor cuts his oxygen line, and so when they're trying to pull him up, they just get a cut air hose. And it's like, oh, he killed himself. So he burnt all of his papers, so the oxygen destroyer is a non-factor. Can't be used again. And then Godzilla bubbles to the surface, and he gets his death rattle that is kind of silly looking because it's definitely a hand puppet in a bathtub, just kind of going. Yeah. Yeah, he just like bibbles and bobbles like a bowling pin or something.
Pretty cute, yeah.
It is kind of cute, and then he falls down to the ocean's floor, and we get to see him turn to bones and then into nothing. So this is the movie confirming he's
dead. Yes.
Yeah, he dead. And it's kind of funny, actually. In much later Godzilla movies, they made a Mechagodzilla out of his bones.
Oh, that's pretty badass. That's metal.
It's pretty fucking metal.
Pretty
so
metal.
This Godzilla from the 54 movie, they take his bones and they build a Mechagodzilla around it. And the storyline in that movie presupposes that there have been multiple Godzillas, and this movie actually kind of plays into that as well. But the movie kind of ends similar to King Kong, where Dr. Yamane is just on the deck of the ship. Everybody does a salute to the good doctor who sacrificed himself, and Dr. Yamane just kind of laments that it's like, it stands to reason that we got one of these big dinosaurs coming out of the Earth's core or whatever. If we keep blowing shit up, maybe we'll get another one. And he looks directly into the camera.
Maybe.
So there is a little bit of a sequel bait at the end. And in fact, this movie did get a direct sequel, which that character is featured in, thereby confirming that it's the same timeline, with a new Godzilla, which is kind of goofy when you think about it. But then we get our traditional Japanese ending with Owari, the end, of flying towards us and then fade to black. And that was Godzilla 1954.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it was good stuff. It's a little hard to talk about because it is one of those, it's like kind of a legit good movie and there's a lot of layers to it. I do think the general mood of it and like the presentation of the story being so much like the story of an entire nation and people in peril, as opposed to just like a town or our breeding pair or whatever. Like it really has a big feel to it, where it's like we can see like masses of people having to scramble to meet the threat, and all the destruction scenes kind of play into that as well. And in historical context, I think is like the most effective way to view the film, because if you just watch it for what it is, for like a child or something, I derived entertainment from it as like a really little kid, but for like casual entertainment or something, I think this movie would be kind of hard to digest if you didn't at least try to roll the clock back in your brain a little bit and put yourself in the shoes of a 1950s person.
Yeah.
But what was your experience like this time around, Kyle?
This time it was harder for me to watch, just because of my schedule this week. But I think the first time I watched it, I had like a glass of wine just to kind of, because older movies, you're like, I'm going to ease in a little bit. But I enjoyed watching it this time, trying to pick up on things. I was trying to notice like the special effects this time around. And they're actually kind of hard to notice, more so than in King Kong. King Kong is pretty easy to see. But yeah, I paid attention more to the Godzilla destruction scenes as well, just to really take in the miniatures.
Yeah, I think the score and the lighting in particular are a huge differential between the two films. Because King Kong, like, the score tells you this is an adventure film. Yeah. Like, you're meant to be exhilarated. Whereas this one, that like ponderous, like lumbering theme that plays when Godzilla's wrecking shit in Tokyo, it doesn't feel thrilling. It's like, oh, this is gloomy and bad. Like everything we're seeing here is really bad. And some of the wanton destruction we see, like there's some stuff I forgot to highlight. One of which is some people that there's that famous painting. It's like a night something or other, night birds maybe, night hawks maybe. It's the diner in the middle of the night. I think it's called Nighthawks, but there's a shot that looks really similar to that in this movie, where it's just a few citizens like getting too close to the action and peering over this wall that looks like the entry to like a subway or something. And sure enough, like Godzilla doesn't even look at them, and he just like casually knocks over a building that falls on them. And it's like, damn, he didn't even know they were there. But that'll happen when you're dealing with a giant lizard that doesn't really seem to have any reason for doing the things that it does. It's not like you're not even ants to him. He's not going to notice you. And the other big one was the woman with her kids. That wasn't actually cut for the American version, but that because it wasn't subtitled, the American audience wasn't privy to what she was saying. But what she's saying is, and she gets her own camera angle, we zoom in on her, and so we see all these flames dancing around her, and she's just squatting in the corner, like just on a street corner with like two kids huddled together with a couple of bags of like clothes and stuff. And she says like, "Well, we're going to where Daddy is. We'll see Daddy soon."
Like
it's like,
Jesus.
That's dark.
Yeah.
That's dark.
There's some really ominous, only like in one scene, I think, where we have like a really ominous, like almost just like a piano, like boom, boom. I think it's the second time when they're getting ready to shoot him. It was the lights, after he told them about the lights, and I think that's when it was.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's during the Tokyo Bay attack sequence, when he's like flipping bridges and stuff.
Yeah, I was getting ready to write it down, but I'm like, I should remember. But yeah, it's like really dark in that one moment.
The footfall is an interesting thing because they make no attempt to actually make that be the sound of his footsteps. It's actually just the score. Like, it's actually supposed to be instrumentation because it's never in sync with his movements, but it often heralds his like arrival.
It's not when he's actually moving. It's more of like when he's moving off screen. But it's not so much a sound effect of him actually stomping. It's the drum, but it's kind of implied that it's him.
Yeah, I'm really glad you highlighted the opening credits as soon as we started, because like I get chills when I see that now, because the Toho logo is virtually identical even to this day. So if you can picture that in your head, when we fade up to that and you just hear boom, boom, and then the Godzilla roar, I think Shin Gojira like begins the same way,
really?
And many other Godzilla movies have done that as well, and it's like the perfect way to ease you into like, ooh, this is gonna be a good one.
Yeah, well,
like
I'm thinking like 1954. There's no movie like Godzilla. I mean, King Kong was around, but like this is a completely different film. So you start off with that. It's like, oh, dude, like I don't even know what this is gonna be. This is exciting.
Yeah, and the roar itself is such an alien sound.
Yeah.
Like especially at that time, like you said, like I don't know what the fuck that is. All I know is it's really menacing and I don't like it.
Like I remember watching Godzilla '98 and thinking, I'm like, that's a crazy noise. Like that's so different than like we had seen Jurassic Park at that point. Like, yeah, I have no idea what that is. Imagine that in 1954. Like, no idea what that is.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because in the Showa era in particular, they cleaned it up a bit. They made it more. It doesn't sound any more natural, like in terms of like animal noise and whatnot. It's processed in such a way that it sounds less abrasive and more palatable, I guess. But then when we get to 1984, which was supposed to be a return to like Godzilla being a menace again, they actually rolled the clock back and they used pretty much the original roar.
Nice.
30 years later, after years of having it be more cleaned up and stuff, and it actually really works for that movie.
Is your Godzilla, your Showa era Criterion, are they all Blu-ray?
Yes.
Oh, so you've got all. Is this the first batch you're gonna have of all Blu-ray of these?
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
This seems like the perfect time to both close the episode and announce the next episode. So we have 5 Tuesdays in March. So we'll have 5 weeks of monster movies and whatnot.
Why not? Yeah.
So there's one that I haven't quite decided. But next week, being as we have been going in like chronological order, it seems fitting that the big movie at the end of the line is Godzilla vs. Kong, which will be out at the end of the month. But 1962, King Kong vs. Godzilla. Seems like the right time for that episode. So we'll get to see the original clash between these two titans. And what I wanted to hint at here, we'll get into rather, was that this Showa era Criterion box set represents the first time that I personally will ever be having a chance to see the Japanese cut of King Kong vs. Godzilla.
Oh.
So this will be a mutual catching up, Kyle.
Nice.
For a Godzilla movie.
Wow.
So for all my talk of being a Godzilla superfan, there are things that I have not experienced in his filmography, and that is one of them.
So the 1962 King Kong v Godzilla is the the Japanese version you haven't seen.
I've seen the American cut, but there are major differences between the two.
Interesting.
And the Japanese cut, as far as I know, has only ever been released in this country via the Criterion Collection.
Oh, so I might actually have to borrow that because it doesn't look like it's anywhere.
Yeah, I'll get it to you somehow because that sucker is hard to fucking find. And believe me, I have considered purchasing it on eBay many times over the years. But then this happened, and I was like, fuck it, we're doing this shit right.
Do you want my copy of War of the Worlds as collateral, or or maybe my Von Trier collection?
Criterion bartering system.
Well, I might actually trade you because I do want you to see Come and See. I think that would be worth you watching.
I'd totally watch it, but anyway, the other episode that I haven't decided on is I was hinting at King Kong 1976, but I don't. I am so concerned that you will absolutely detest that film. So the other suggestion I had would be King Kong Escapes, which is it's a Toho film, so a lot of the same special effects technicians from Godzilla 1954 doing a King Kong movie, wherein there is a Mecha Kong.
See, I feel like we're defaulting to Japanese properties when I feel like we should be at least exploring the American side of this, and I think we should go through and watch the 76 King Kong. I want it because I've seen a clip of it. I'm like, that's a dude in a gorilla suit, so I kind of want to see that. Jessica Lange in her prime. I mean, yeah, and Jeff Bridges, I believe you said, yeah.
Jeff Bridges and Charles Grodin, yeah.
You said Jeff Bridges, and I'm like, well, obviously I want to watch that one. So I feel like we should do that. I think it'll be fun.
Okay. It'll be interesting. But that being said, thank you so much for joining us for this very special episode of Catching Up on Cinema. And if you would like to catch up on any of our other Catching Up on Cinema content, you can find all of that collected on our website at catchinguponcinema.com. We also have a couple of social media accounts in the form of an Instagram at Catching Up on Cinema, as well as a Twitter at Catching Cinema. So feel free to hit me up there if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, any of that bullshit. And the show is available on pretty much any podcasting platform you can imagine, so fucking Google it. That being said, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Yeah.